Hey guys. Today we'll be recapping the story called The Quiet Game. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, as it really helps our channel. Thanks. Ellie, who has forgotten how to speak, tells about her story. I am Ellie, a human doll made only to listen. Not only have I long since forgotten how to speak, but I was also never properly taught to write. My family members would say things like this to me. Ellie, do you have any idea what that bastard said to me? I've never told anyone about this before, but since you can't speak, I suppose I can tell you. You becoming mute might actually be for the best. I'm Ellie, the mute doll. The only thing I could do was listen to others. Until one day, I started acting as a confidant for three men. Lennon, who enjoys solving riddles. Librato, who has an unusual taste. And Hayden, who is attracted to men. I became their salvation. However, I was slowly drowning in a sea of emotions. Will I be able to escape from this hellish place? That was when I decided I couldn't live like this anymore. Leaving my life as mute Ellie behind, I took on a new life as a countess. Lennon said, Ellie? I'm afraid you have the wrong person. I am Countess Fever. She thinks I am no longer that mute Ellie you once knew. Ellie tells I am a human doll. A doll made solely to never talk and only listen to others. However, I wasn't always like this. It wasn't until I began playing that game. Her dad asked her, would you like to play a game with me, Ellie? When I was about 5, my father suggested playing a simple game. Ellie asked her father, a game? Yes, father. Her father said, good. All you have to do is remain absolutely silent. Simple, is it not? He said, all right then. From this moment forth, you are never to speak but only listen. Suddenly her father starts shouting, that vile baron made a fool of me today once again. I would have long quit if it weren't for my wretched wife and children. This damn family. Ellie gets shocked and thinks, father? Ellie tells, my father worked as a secretary for a baron. However, his job consisted mainly of doing dirty work. Her father shouts, there's only so much I can put up with. How much longer do I have to suffer? Ellie thinks, there's no need to be frightened. This is just a game. Her father said, I feel much better after talking to you about it. You have a gift for sitting still and listening, Ellie. Ellie said, thank you, F.A., but her dad interrupts her, asking in a serious tone, have you already forgotten the rules? She asked, but the game has ended, has it not? Her dad said, to hone your gift of listening, I believe we should continue this game. He said, yes, you see. It's as if you were born to take on this role. She tells, and just like that, the horrifying game never came to an end. Even as time passed, the game never showed any signs of ending, and even my mother and sister decided to join in. That vile bastard. You see, I'm in love with a man who isn't your father. Every day, all I can think about is taking my own life. As if they were confessing to a priest. My family started pouring their anger, troubles, and even secrets onto me. Then, at some point, I forgot how to speak. Ellie thinks, how was I supposed to speak again? She tells, at first, I was devastated. However, my father was delighted, as if he had heard wonderful news. You've become mute? That may actually be for the best. Since I barely spoke much to begin with, becoming mute wasn't as uncomfortable as I'd imagined. More so because I could read and write, though not perfectly, which made things a lot more bearable. What was important was that I remained as mute Ellie for my family. The summer I turned 17, my father proposed a new arrangement. Her dad said, your gift is much too valuable to be kept a secret, Ellie. We should show it to the world and make the best use of it. She tells, even after finding out my father's intentions to use me, there was nothing I could do. I was but a mute who was incapable of disclosing the secrets of others. Not only was I used to listening to others, But if I dared to go against my father, who was the figure of absolute authority in our family, I was afraid that I, too, would be sold off. Her dad said, Ellie, your mother believes your younger sibling died from food poisoning, but the truth is that I sold that child to a slave market. You would understand why I did so if you heard that child's cries. The way that child would cry incessantly for hours. Either way, we didn't have the money to raise a third child. That child is better off living a comfortable life under a kind master than in this gutter. Of course, I was distressed. After all, what father would want to sell his own child? She tells, it was then that I realized, once I no longer become useful to my father, I will face the same fate as my sibling. In all honesty, what could a mute like me do if not this? That's why I decided to do as my father wanted and let others use my gift as well. At least this way, I was helping my father pay off his debt with the money I earned from listening to others. But I didn't know then the people who would be waiting for me on the other end. While traveling to somewhere, Ellie thinks, it's been a while since I left the estate like this. I can't recall the last time I did. My father detested me leaving the house. Before leaving, a lady said to her, Ellie, you can leave the dishes. I'll do them. She thinks, as if they had felt some sort of remorse for their actions, my family rarely made me do any chores. As such, I spent most of my time looking out the window and tending to the garden. Her father comes while she was in garden and said, Ellie? She turns and thinks, so, it's father. Her father grabs her shouting, how many times do I have to tell you not to leave the house? She thinks, why won't he let me go outside? I was curious, but I couldn't dare to go against my father. Meanwhile, the carriage stops and she thinks, have we arrived? What do I do now? I can't see anything with this blindfold on. Someone holds her hand and she thinks, a hand? Is this person trying to help me down? She thinks, what an incredibly soft hand. It doesn't feel like the coachman's. Is it a woman? I wonder where they're taking me. The man who was holding her hand said the blindfold was frustrating, wasn't it? She gets shocked and thinks, a man? I assumed it was a woman because of how soft the hand was. The man said, allow me to take it off. He removes the blindfold from her eyes. She opens her eyes thinking, it's bright. Meanwhile, she noticed the man and he said, it's a pleasure to meet you. Call me Hayden. Please have a seat. Seeing him, she thinks, what a beautiful man. She thinks, based on how he's dressed, could he be from a family of high status? That aside, there's nobody else but us in the room. Seeing him, she thinks, I wonder what's bothering him. He looks grim. Hayden said, there's something I'd like to discuss before delving into why I brought you here. He said, I heard you were incapable of writing and speaking. She thinks, I do know how to write, just not very well. But I suppose I should keep that to myself. Hayden said, that is what led me to sign a contract with your father. He said, as much as I feel sorry for putting you through this, what I'm about to say may not leave this room, no matter what. However, I believe you have a right to know the contents of the contract, which is why I bring this up. If my secret becomes known, you shall be killed, assuming that there is concrete proof you were the one who leaked it, of course. She thinks, he talks about killing me without batting an eye. It's as if he's killed a few people before. He asked her, do you understand? She nods her head for a yes. She thinks, everyone has a secret or two. It doesn't matter if you are attractive or plain, rich or poor. And the heavier the secret, the more you want to get this off my chest. The more you are inclined to feel this impulse. Hayden must have sought me out for that very same reason. Hayden said, very well then. I suppose I can now tell you my secret. He said, I believe I am attracted to men. He said, I understand how odd I must seem to share such a secret with someone I've met just today. However, this secret of mine has been eating me up inside to the point where I felt I might die from frustration if I didn't share it with someone soon. Ellie thinks, rather than think he was odd, I felt a sense of sympathy for him. Not over the fact that he was attracted to men, but because he genuinely seemed to be in great pain. However, I showed no signs of being surprised and chose not to take any action other than listen to what he had to say. The reason for that being, in the past, my father once heavily reprimanded me for trying to console him. Her father asked in anger, "Did I ever ask for your shallow consolation?" She thinks, it was then that I realized people who told me their secrets were not seeking consolation but a sense of relief. After that incident, I stopped showing others my emotions. Hayden said, just when I was in so much pain that I was contemplating death. He said, "I heard about you, Ellie." Her father said to someone, "I have a daughter who, Ellie thinks I see." So that's how my father spoke of me. He must have spoken well to have someone of such high social status seek me out. Hayden said, "I admit I was more inclined to your services after knowing you were a commoner. You see, rumors travel fast in high society. However, nobles neither listen to nor believe the words of a commoner. As such, even if you were to reveal my secret to other nobles, your words would fall on deaf ears." He said, "I understand if you think I'm a coward. I wouldn't deny that." She shakes her head thinking, "No, you're not." Hayden said, "Thank you. Where should I begin with my story?" The first time I felt differently about men was 5 years ago at a riding arena. Whoa there! I saw a man wearing a pair of white breeches that clung to his thighs. And in that moment, I felt an uncontrollable sense of excitement. My entire body began to burn up as well. But at the same time, I was overcome by a feeling of immense shame. Certainty of my leanings only grew stronger from that moment, and I would despise myself for getting aroused whenever I saw him. I tried dating women, but it only made it clearer that I was attracted to men. I did everything I could to fix it. As I am the second son, the only way I can become the head of my household is to surpass my elder brother. And to achieve that, I cannot afford to have any tarnishing rumors about me going around. However, I have come to love somebody. I am trapped in a whirlpool of emotions. Every time I see him, I feel as though I have become enslaved by him. Almost as if I were born just to love him. He asked, "What am I supposed to do?" She thinks I looked at him silently, because that was all I was capable of doing. I wonder what love feels like, or what it's like to have feelings for someone. There was a time when I wanted to escape this hellhole. I wanted to live my life solely as Ellie instead of as a vessel my family could dump their emotions into. I never wished for anything special. All I wanted was to speak again and meet other people. I just wanted to live a normal life like everyone else. Her father grabs her saying, "Ellie, well done! The man you met today wishes to see you again tomorrow. Not only that, but another man is also interested in your gift. It appears there are many men who want you, Ellie." Hearing this, she thinks, Hayden requested to see me once again. He said, "Please have a seat. I've been suffering from insomnia for a very long time. Maybe it's because I told you about my secret, but for the first time in a long while, I was able to sleep well last night. I have finally come to realize how liberating it is to share your secret with someone. If only I had looked for someone like you earlier. Of course, the chances of finding such a person are close to zero. There was a time when I couldn't bear the pain of loving this man. And yet I prayed every day that I could kiss him just once. I sound like a hypocrite, do I not? Dreaming about kissing a man despite loathing myself for being attracted to one." He asked her, "Have you ever kissed someone before, Ellie?" She shakes her head for a no. He said, "Then, would you like to try it with me?" He said, "Only if that is what you want, of course. I have tried kissing women in hopes of resolving my problem. Unfortunately, I was unable to feel an attraction to any of them. However, I have a feeling that it may be different with you." He asked, "If it is all right with you, may I sit beside you?" She nods her head thinking, he's being extremely careful with his words. // He sits beside her and said, "Allow me to ask you again. May I kiss you?" She thinks, kiss a man? Even though I've never even talked to one before? Once a man said to her, "Hello there. Tending to the garden, I see." Giving a basket to her, he said, "These were ordered by your mother." Her father comes and shouts, "Ellie! Come over here this instant." She thinks, my father was extremely opposed to me interacting with men because he was afraid I might fall in love with one of them and run away. She thinks, I wonder what a man's lips feel like. She thinks while she nods her head, if I turn him down, I might never know what it feels like to kiss someone for the rest of my life. Hayden said, "Well then." He leans towards her and kissed her. She thinks, oh, so this is what kissing feels like. Hayden said, "If you were a man, I think I might have fallen in love with you." Seeing his eyes, she thinks, I can see the regret in his eyes. Hayden asked, "May I see you again in a few days?" She nods her head while thinking, I want to tell him it's okay. But no words are coming out of my mouth. Hayden starts crying and said, "Oh," even without saying anything. "I can tell you're trying to console me." She wipes his tears with her finger. She thinks, the only thing Hayden is guilty of is loving someone. If loving someone makes you despise yourself to the point where you would want to take your own life, then I don't wish to fall in love with anyone for as long as I live. The next day, her father said, "With the money we're earning from selling your gift, I can soon quit my job of cleaning up after the Baron. Tomorrow, you'll be going to a tavern. There you shall meet another man who wishes to use your gift." While traveling to tavern, she thinks, I wonder what kind of man it will be this time. Seeing as how I'm not blindfolded, I guess he isn't as fixated on meeting in secrecy as Hayden. She thinks, I still cannot believe I kissed Hayden. If someone were to ask if I wanted to kiss him again, a little more, my answer would most likely be, yes. Although I cannot say the same for him. A butler said, "We have arrived." He takes her inside saying, "This way, please." While walking, she thinks, it smells musty. This is my first time stepping foot inside a tavern. There's no one here. Has the man my father talked about still not arrived? Meanwhile, a man comes and said, "Miss Ellie?" Lennon said, "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Seeing him, she thinks, is he the man my father was talking about? He asked, "So you're the young lady who listens to others?" Sorry if my casual language offended you. If you want, I can speak more formally. He said, "Sit. I can't keep such a pretty lady standing now, can I?" "It's nice to meet you finally. I'm Lennon." He said, "Although there's no way a mute like you could say my name, I figured we still ought to know each other's names, wouldn't you agree?" He said, "You don't have to tell me yours. I already know your name is Ellie from your father." He said, "I heard you weren't born a mute." He said, "In case you were wondering, I heard that from your father as well. I rarely spoke as well when I was a child. Back then, I was extremely fed up with my surroundings and felt incredibly deprived. But I was too young then to do anything to change it. Since nothing changed from speaking up, I simply started speaking less and less." Hearing this, she thinks, I never would have guessed that about him. He laughed and said, "Hard to believe, isn't it? But it's the truth. After all, I have nothing to gain from lying to you." However, at some point, I started speaking, and eventually, I became as fluent as I am now. He asked, "Do you know why?" She shakes her head. He said, "Because if I don't say what's in my heart, or what's in my mind, it disappears. You need to express yourself, no matter what it is. That's the only way it becomes meaningful. If you keep everything bottled inside you like now, it'll eventually make you ill. Which is why I'd like you to learn how to express yourself." She gets shocked and thinks, we've only met today. So why is he being so nice to me? He said, "You're curious why I said that, aren't you?" He said, "I came here with the intention of getting you to speak. After hearing about you, I arranged this meeting to meet you. But I would have never guessed you'd totally be my type. He said, "You're stunning." Hearing this, she thinks, "I've never heard that before." He said, "I have a lot of things I'd like to ask you, which is why I earnestly want you to find the ability to speak again." He said, "On that note, let's play a game together." She thinks, "The only game I know of is the quiet game." He said, "It's called the guessing game. Even though I'm curious about you, you can't answer my questions. Thus, you'll be guessing things about me instead." She thinks, "What an odd person." Before I could even finish my thought, the game had already started. He squeezed her hand, saying, "All right then. The first question. Do you think I'm married?" She shakes her head for a no, thinking, he doesn't have a ring on his finger. He said, "Correct." He said, "I'm not particularly seeing anyone, but there is one woman I see periodically. It's dull to spend endless nights alone, you see." He asked, "Have you ever spent the night with someone before?" She shakes her head for a no. He asked, "How about kissing? Have you kissed someone before?" Hearing this, she paused. She thinks, "Kissing, you say?" Seeing her, he said, "I guess you have. But judging by the look of bitterness on your face, I assume it was with someone you can never be with." She recalls Hayden's words, "I believe I am attracted to men." She thinks, since Hayden is attracted to men, I suppose I can never be with him. Lennon said, My? An unrequited love. How unfortunate." He asked, "Do you mean to say you kissed without even checking your feelings for one another?" She thinks, "I wouldn't really put it that way." He laughed and said, "You look like there is a lot you would like to say. But if you kiss someone without sharing your feelings, I wonder if that means I have a chance at kissing you as well. I don't mean to brag, but I'm a pretty good kisser. What do you think?" He said, "Sorry if that came off a little bold. You remind me of my younger self. I couldn't help it. But I meant what I said. I'd really like to ask if I can kiss you when I see you again. Next time. Let's meet somewhere brighter instead of this musty tavern." He said, "Give it some thought. It's time I took my leave. You'll meet me again, won't you?" While leaving, she thinks, "I'm fully aware that living according to my father's will and not expressing myself will ultimately be the reasons for my demise, as Lennon said. However, I am at a loss as to what I must do to escape my current situation. All I'm doing is walking in circles, unable to move forward. Ever since I was a child, I've wished for a savior who could rescue me from my misery. Could that person be Lennon?" She reached her home, and while opening the door, she hears some voice, "Please." She thinks, "Is that father?" She sneaks inside and gets shocked seeing her father begging to a person. Her father said, "Please give me some more time. I promise to pay you back." The man said, "As much as I'd like to, I'm afraid my patience has run out. If you fail to pay me by next month, you'll leave me with no other choice." The person leaves saying this. She thinks, "My father has dabbled in gambling since I was a child. What started as a casual activity turned into a full-blown addiction, to the point where our family was on the verge of bankruptcy. That is why, to earn money, I started listening to the secrets of strangers instead of only my family's." She moves inside and her father grabs her, saying, "I trust you didn't make any mistakes with the gentleman you met today. There is no room for mistakes. You must fight your every urge to speak. Do you understand? You are our family's only hope, Ellie." She thinks, seeing my father's manic eyes made me realize that if I weren't capable of being used as a tool for making money, I would have been long sold off, just like my younger sibling. While traveling to Lennon's place, she thinks, I enjoy getting lost in my thoughts as I travel in a carriage. I'm able to imagine leading a life that I want, instead of one dictated by someone else. It's as if I can transport myself somewhere else for a while. She was lost in her thoughts while Lennon asked her, "Are you asleep?" She shakes her head for a no. He laughed and said, "Is that so? I thought you had dozed off." He said, "I have a younger brother. He's a man of few words and little affection. Still, since he's the only sibling I have, I can't bring myself to despise him even though he simply loathes me. She nods her head thinking, I understand. I have an older sister too. Of course, she only thinks of me as someone she can dump her negative emotions onto. Lennon said, though he finds me annoying, I try to talk with him whenever I get the chance. Do you know what he says to me then? Go on, take a guess. He said, shut up. Lennon Hills. She thinks he smiles whenever he talks about his brother. Whoever his brother is, I'm envious of him. Would I have fallen for that smile if I were a noblewoman instead of a mute commoner? He chuckled and asked, how about we start our game for today? He asked, do you have an idea of where I'm taking you? She shakes her head for a no. He said, I'm taking you to my estate today. Why, you ask? Well, that's an answer for you to figure out. They reached at their destination and he asked her, we're here. Shall we? She grabs her hand and comes out. Lennon smiled and aid, excellent. He leans towards her asking, how do you feel today? He asked, do you feel like speaking? He said, I'm genuinely curious about your voice. He said, welcome to my estate, Ellie. She starts glancing at her surrounding. He said, the garden is a little bare, isn't it? I'm afraid that's my brother's doing. He said it got in the way of his horseback riding. Come to think of it, Hayden mentioned horseback riding as well. They reached at the door and he said, we're here. Hayden comes out and she gets shocked seeing him. Lennon said, Hayden? Seeing her he gets shocked and Ellie thinks, what is he doing here? Hayden turns without saying anything. She thinks, he avoided my eyes as if I were a stranger. Lennon grabs his hand. He said, hey, how about a greeting at least? Hayden releases his hand from Lennon's hand and starts walking on his way. Lennon said, rude bastard. That's him. My stepbrother. She thinks, at that moment, a thought I shouldn't have had flashed in my mind. Do you know what my brother says to me then? Shut up, Lennon Hills. What Lennon said about his younger brother, and the way Hayden flinched when Lennon touched his hand. Maybe Lennon has something to do with Hayden's secret. They went inside and seeing the portraits of former estate heads she thinks, there are portraits of all the former estate heads. I was right to think they were both noblemen. She noticed their family name, Hills. She gets shocked and thinks, Duke Hills? To think they're both from a family of such high pedigree. Lennon said, could you come over here for a second? Oh, and as compensation for coming all the way out here. He said, I'll pay you extra for your time today. To you, not your father. Meanwhile his stepmom comes and said, Lennon Hills. It's time you stopped playing around with naive young women. Think of your age. How much longer do you plan to keep this up? He asked her, how long have you been standing there, mother? He said, how impolite of you to barge in without knocking. Please leave. Ellie thinks, that's Lennon's mother? But they don't look alike, and she seems much too young. Lennon said, you seem curious. She's my stepmother. We don't share a single drop of blood. That aside, could you change into this? My maid shall assist you. She thinks a dress? The maid said, this way please. After wearing the dress she gets shocked and thinks, oh my. I never knew such a beautiful garment existed. It must cost quite a hefty sum. She opens the door while thinking, why would Lennon give me this? With that thought in mind, I was about to knock on Lennon's door, when I noticed the door was slightly open. Instead of knocking, I decided to take a peek. What I saw then was utterly shocking. Seeing Lennon kissing his stepmom, she gets shocked and thinks, what? What is going on? His stepmom comes outside and said, oh, you're the young lady from before. I'll see you around. Goodbye. Ellie thinks she doesn't seem the slightest bit fazed. It's as if she isn't bothered that I witnessed what happened. Lennon comes and asked, Ellie? When did you get here? You should have knocked. He asked, could you come in for a second? She walks in while thinking, I'm suddenly feeling a little awkward. Suddenly Lennon closed the door and comes close to Ellie and asked, "You saw what happened, didn't you?" She flinched and thinks he knows. He comes close while saying, "Allow me to ask you another question. Do you know the best way to make someone feel defeated?" He kissed her hairs while saying, "Let me tell you, then. The best way to make someone feel defeated is by stealing the thing they treasure most. That is why I kissed my stepmother." Hearing this, she thinks, does that mean Lennon kissed his stepmother to hurt someone who treasures her? But instead of looking happy, he seems sad. She comes close to him and touches his face. He said, "Ellie." She hugged him, thinking, though I may not know the reasons you have for doing this, I hope you won't feel so sad. Lennon sighed and said, "Ellie, I want to get revenge on my father. He killed my mother, so my plan is to steal my stepmother from him. I want him to feel pain so excruciating that he wishes he were dead. I wonder why I am able to share this with you despite having only met you twice. Your father was right. You truly have a gift for listening to others. I feel a strange desire to disclose all my deepest secrets to you." He leans towards her, asking, "Can I tell you another secret?" He said, "I do not enjoy kissing my stepmother in the slightest. She reeks of nauseating perfume, whereas you smell lovely. On that note, allow me to ask you a question. What do you think I want from you at this moment?" She thinks, why is he staring at me so intensely? He said, "A kiss?" He said, "I wish to kiss you, Ellie. If you do not try to free your hand from my grip, I shall take that as permission to kiss you." Ellie thinks, Lennon gave me a choice, and I chose not to break free from his grip. She thinks, I'm curious. Will Lennon's kiss be as soft as Hayden's? I hope Lennon doesn't regret his decision like Hayden did. Meanwhile, Lennon kissed her and then turned, saying, "You may return home for the day. And upon your return home, I would like you to ponder why I gave you that dress." This concludes today's session. When you step outside, my attendant shall take you home. She thinks, am I mistaken? Or did his ears seem red? She walked downstairs while thinking, it's hard to believe that even Lennon, who seems so perfect, has such a dark secret. And to think it was one fostered out of hatred for his own father. As someone who also despises her father, it appears we have that in common. I hope I'll get a chance to tell him that. That aside, Lennon's stepmother reminds me of someone. She could very well be Hayden's biological mother. While heading back to her home, she thinks, I wonder why Lennon gave me this dress. Did he kiss me because he has feelings for me? But his reaction didn't seem much different from Hayden's for that to be the case. Ellie comes back to her home and found her sister shouting, Father, please do not do this. Please do not send me there." She shouts, "Please, Father." Seeing her, Ellie thinks, what is happening? Why is my sister? Her sister, seeing her, dashed towards her shouting, Ellie. She said, Father is trying to sell me somewhere. Please help me stop him." She thinks, what? Her father said, Ellie, your sister's marriage partner has been decided. She thinks it can't be. It's too sudden. Just yesterday, my father was begging the creditor because he wasn't able to repay his growing debt from gambling. Oh, I see. Just like how my father sold off my younger sibling. He is planning to pay off his debt by selling my older sister into marriage. Her sister said, Ellie, please help me. Ellie thinks, how long has my sister been begging in the rain? How long has she been begging for the flower bed to cave in like so? Her father grabs her sister, saying, nothing will change, even if you plead for Ellie's help. Now get up. People are waiting for you, Isabel. Her father takes her away and she shouts, Ellie. Ellie shouts in her mind, Isabel. Her sister said, Ellie, remember. Father won't stop at this. You will be next? She thinks, to be honest, I've never had a genuine conversation with my sister before. But she was still the family member I was most fond of. I can't let her go like this. Ellie grabs her father's hand, shouting in her mind, "Father, please don't do this. Please bring Isabel back." Her father said, "I suggest you stay out of this if you do not wish to get married soon like your sister. Just do as I tell you to, like you have for all these years. Understood, Ellie?" She thinks this can't be. Father really sees us as nothing more than money. Will I really be next? Ellie. That night, my mother came home drunk but didn't ask about my sister. Was she already aware that Isabel would be sold? She recalls Isabel's words, "Ellie, remember. Father won't stop at this. You will be next?" She thinks my sister's last words echoed in my ears for a long time. She thinks, I wonder where Isabel was sold off to. Meanwhile, someone enters her room and she raises thinking, who is that? A man covers her face with his hand and puts a knife on her neck. Ellie thinks, is this person here to kill me? I'm scared. But this could be my chance to escape my dreadful reality. I want to be at peace finally. Everyone only wants me to understand what they are feeling. Nobody wants to know how I feel. I don't have a reason to continue living. The man was Hayden and he asked, "Why you are not resisting?" Hearing his voice, she thinks, this voice, Hayden? He asked her, "Why do you act as if you are hoping to die?" He drops the knife saying, "Because I know what that feels like. I cannot bring myself to harm you." She thinks, why isn't he killing me? It was my chance to finally be free. He said, "My full name is Hayden Hills." Hayden Hills and Lennon Hills. So they really are brothers. He said, "Seeing as how you are not very surprised, I take it you already knew my full name. Did you find out when we met the other day?" She nods her head thinking, that's right. I figured it out then. He clenched her hand saying, "I see. Your thoughts were correct. I am indeed Lennon Hill's younger brother." He said, "Since you know my secret, I became anxious when I saw you with my brother that I..." She thinks, although he didn't finish his sentence, it was clear that Hayden was planning to kill me. But why didn't he? She recalls his words, "If my secret becomes known, you shall be killed." Assuming that there is concrete proof you were the one who leaked it, of course. She thinks, he spoke of killing someone so lightly. So why did he not kill me? She thinks, even though you tried to kill me. She wipes his tears thinking, I do not despise you. He flinched and said, Ellie? Meanwhile, someone knocks at the door and she thinks, who could it be? It was her father and he shouts, Ellie. Hearing his voice, she thinks, Father? He said, open the door. Ellie thinks, I'll be in trouble if Father finds Hayden here. She grabs him thinking, I need to hide him. Her father asked, Are you asleep? Her father shows, Ellie. Open the door at once. She hides him behind the curtains and he asked, Ellie? Her father asked, Do you not hear me? Her father opens the door and asked, What were you doing for you to lock the door? He said, Ellie. Are you hiding something from me? She starts trembling. Her father moved towards her saying, I knew you would be awake. He said, You knew I would come to you regarding what happened in the afternoon, didn't you? You certainly know your role well. She thinks, there is only one reason Father would come to see me. He's here to talk about selling Isabel. Her father said, I am so proud of you, Ellie. You are indeed different from your siblings. She thinks, oh no. He's sitting on the spot that's wet. Her father said, Your sister was always easily scared. That is why that mere incident made her so afraid of men. What happened was deeply traumatic for Isabel to dismiss it as a mere incident. As a result of sexual assault, Isabel would tremble in fear at the sight of men. Despite knowing this, Father sold her into marriage solely for his own selfish gains. Her father said, but not to worry. Her new husband will help get rid of that fear. Everything I did was for Isabel's own good. She thinks, what you did was simply to pay off your debt. Isabel didn't want to get married. He grabs her hand saying, Ellie. Listen to what I say and do not look away. That is your role, is it not? Don't worry about Isabel. She will become happy. And thanks to her, our family will now be rich. Finally, I can sleep in peace. He said, "Good night, my dear daughter Ellie." She thinks, he's disgusting. She thinks, how can someone who calls himself a father say such things? Why did I play his game for all these years? At first, I wanted to gain his praise and affection. But this is no longer a simple game. Her father stops and said, "By the way, Ellie." He touches the wet place on the bed. He said, "It appears your bed is wet." He asked, "Is there somebody else in your room?" She starts sweating and thinks, what should I do? Hayden comes out saying, "I decided to stop by. There was a secret I urgently needed to tell your daughter." She thinks, Hayden. He said, "I shall see to it that I inform you of my arrival beforehand in the future." Seeing Hayden, her father said, "Lord Hayden." "Yes, I would appreciate that very much, my lord." She thinks, why is father laughing? Is he happy at Hayden's visit? Hayden said, "Now leave us be. I have yet to finish talking to your daughter." Her father said, "Of course, my lord. However, there is one important thing you must know." He said, "I'm afraid my virgin daughter doesn't serve men at night. Please keep that in mind." Ellie thinks, what is he talking about? He said, "Virgin brides fetch higher prices, you see." She shouts in her mind, "Father!" Hearing this, she gets shocked and thinks, he really sees me as nothing more than a means of making money. She dashed towards outside and Hayden asked, "Ellie? Where are you going?" He comes outside and asked her, "Have you lived your entire life this way? Is that why you didn't avoid my dagger earlier?" He asked, "Did you believe dying would be better than this reality?" Ellie in her mind said, "You're right. My life isn't one worth living." Hayden said, "I can help you escape your father's clutches." Hearing this, she gets shocked. Hearing this, she clenched her hands and thinks, but Hayden said, "Of course, I'm not forcing you to. Take some time to think about it." He leaves and Ellie, sitting on her bed, thinks, is it all right for me to use Lennon's secret like this? I'm not even sure if I can fully trust Hayden yet. Ellie tells, "With those worries on my mind, I drifted off to sleep and had a dream. In the dream, I was fleeing. But I felt a sense of freedom and happiness I'd never felt before." She was sitting in gardens thinking, I wonder what would happen if I escaped this hell like I did in my dream. She starts digging thinking, will anyone come looking for me? Meanwhile, someone comes and asks, "Are you Ellie?" She gets surprised and thinks, I've never heard this voice before. Who could it be? She turns and seeing him thinks, what a burly man. Vibrato said, "Oh, my apologies. My height must make it difficult for you to look up. It's a pleasure to meet you." She thinks, it's my first time seeing this man, but he seems like a kind person. She moves her hand towards him, saying in her mind, "It's nice to meet you too." Vibrato grabs her hand. Meanwhile, he starts staring on her hand. She thinks, why is he staring at my hand? Is it dirty from the soil? Suddenly, Vibrato raised her hand and kissed it. She gets shocked and thinks, what is he doing? She released her hand from Vibrato's hand, thinking, this man is out of his mind as well. Suddenly he bowed and said, "My apologies. Your hand was just so beautiful that I couldn't help myself." He said, "Please forgive me. I swear I didn't do that intentionally. Your father informed me that you have a gift for listening to people's secrets. He said that rude behavior you just witnessed is why I have come to find you." She thinks, so he's also here to disclose his secret to me. Then I guess it's best if we headed inside. Others may get the wrong idea if they were to see. Suddenly she flinched and recalls her father's words from last night. Please keep that in mind. Virgin brides fetch higher prices, you see. Thinking this, she covers her face and thinks, no, maybe it would be better if people got the wrong idea instead. Seeing her, Vibrato asked, "Ellie? Are you feeling all right? You seem a little ill." They went to a cafe and sits in front of each other and remains silent. She thinks, why isn't he saying anything? Vibrato stares up and down. She tilts her head thinking, what is he looking at? Vibrato said, oh, I apologize. It seems I was staring at your hands without even realizing it. He said, to be honest, you have what I consider to be the most ideal hands. Hearing this, she thinks, he's much stranger than I thought. He said, I met your father in a tavern. I had caused a certain incident that day due to my obsession with hands and was lamenting while having a drink about how I was suspended from work. Your father noticed I was having a hard time and suggested I meet you. I can assure you that you will feel much better after meeting my daughter. That is how I made arrangements to see you today. He starts blushing while saying, but I never imagined I'd meet the hands of my dreams here. Hearing this, she thinks, my hands are on the rougher side though. What part of them does he find beautiful? Vibrato said, I understand what you're thinking. What I think makes hands beautiful is slightly different from what others may think. Although this is a little embarrassing to say, a pair of beautiful hands to me are hands that resemble my mother's, who passed away 5 years ago. Maybe it's because I miss her so, but whenever I see a pair of beautiful hands, I have a desire to touch and kiss th. Meanwhile, he stops and said, please don't get the wrong idea. I don't carry any peculiar feelings for my mother. I'm not sure why I'm like this either. He asked, it's your first time seeing someone like me, isn't it? She touches his hand, saying in her mind, it's all right. I've encountered people even stranger than you. Compared to brothers who use their family members for their gains and a father who sold his own daughter to repay his debts. At least you don't think of people as tools. You're much more humane than any of them. Even if your preference may be a little strange, it stems from longing for your mother. She write on his hand. You must have loved your mother very much. He gets emotional and starts crying. He said, why am I crying? He said, you're right. Although I loved both of my parents, I was a little more affectionate towards my mother, who used to kindly pat my head. But I can no longer feel the warmth of her hand again. She thinks, I can't help but feel a little jealous. I wonder what it feels like to be loved by your mother. Have I ever received such love from my mother before? He said, I understand that this is a strange request, but there's something I'd like to ask of you. He asked her, would you please become my master? Hearing this, she thinks, master? He said, I apologize for startling you, but I promise I don't have any ill intent. I have the feeling that if you, who have hands resembling my mother's, become my master, I will undoubtedly be saved. I only ask that you pat my head or let me kiss your hand when you compliment me. She thinks it's a strange request, but if it helps fill the void of his mother, then. Vibrato said, of course, you're free to turn me down if you. She holds his hand thinking, I want to hold his hand for him. Vibrato asked her, is this your way of saying yes? He said, thank you, Ellie. You're the first person to ever accept me. She thinks, he reminds me of my younger sibling, who was sold off. Because they would fall so often, they'd always have to hold my hand. It breaks my heart that they were sold off, just like Isabel was. She thinks, just like how I can fulfill Vibrato's longing for his mother, maybe he can fulfill the longing I have for my younger sibling. Vibrato asked her, if it's all right with you, may I kiss your hand to commemorate this special day? She nods her head thinking, guess it should be fine. He wouldn't do anything strange to me since my hands remind him of his mother's. Vibrato kissed her hand. He said, Master? May I see you again tomorrow? She thinks, tomorrow? Father has always been the one to decide whom I meet. Is it all right for me to give him an answer as I wish? Next morning Ellie was in sleep and Vibrato comes saying, Master. She opens her eyes thinking, who could it be this early in the morning? He said, it's me, Vibrato. I apologize for coming over so early. She gets shocked and thinks, El Vibrato? He said, I'm used to waking up early because of my days as a knight, but the thought of seeing you made me wake up even earlier. She shakes her head thinking, I'm surprised, but it's nothing to apologize for. I don't mind being with someone early in the morning. She raised her hand towards his dress, thinking, that aside, he looks a lot different from yesterday. He said, you noticed. He said, I wanted to look good for you, so I woke up early and dressed myself up. Do you like it? She pats his head, thinking, he really reminds me of my younger sibling. Vibrato said, thank you for your compliment, master. He said, would you like to get ready? I can prepare a light breakfast for us before we head out. She thinks, since father won't be coming home for the next few days, I suppose that will be fine, won't it? He asked her, how did you find the soup, master? She nods her head, thinking, it was delicious. He said, I'm glad you liked it. Shall we head out now? They went outside and he said, the weather today is so lovely. He holds her hand, saying, being able to hold your hand like this makes me incredibly happy. She thinks, oh, I'm happy too. The sound of music playing, children laughing, and the warmth of Vibrato's hand. It's a moment I'd look back upon with fondness when I'm having a hard time. Suddenly they stopped at a place. Ellie thinks, why did he suddenly stop? Seeing Duke Hilly Estate, she gets confused and thinks, isn't this Duke Hill's estate? He said, this is where I used to work. Hearing this, she gets shocked and thinks, what? He said, I was the Lord's right-hand man. Usually, he's easygoing, but he can be cold-hearted when he needs to be. That's why he suspended me the moment I made a mistake. She thinks, that means Vibrato is a knight who works for House Hills. This is beyond a pure coincidence. How is it possible that all three men who came to share their secrets with me are all somehow related to House Hills? He said, my lord may get the wrong idea if he sees us here. Shall we go someplace else for now? She thinks, it's not favorable for me to run into Lennon or Hayden either. After they spent time together, now they were to leave each other as the sun sets. He said, thank you, master. Today's the happiest day I've spent in a while. He kissed her hand, saying, I will remember it forever. He said, I'd like to meet you again tomorrow, but I'm afraid I can't as I must attend a banquet. He said, my lord insisted I attend, you see, even though I absolutely dislike banquets. She thinks, a banquet? She thinks, I wonder if Lennon and Hayden will be attending as well. She comes back to her home and found a letter. Seeing it, she thinks, a letter? The letter said, have you thought about why I gave you the dress? I'll give you the answer tomorrow. Oh. Don't forget to wear that dress when you see me tomorrow. Lennon Hills. Reading it, she thinks, he wrote it only using simple words. I guess it's his way of being considerate. I'd like you to learn how to express yourself. After all, he's such a kind-hearted person. Next day, while leaving, she thinks, come to think of it, father didn't return home yesterday either. The driver said, please hurry. I've been asked not to be late. She thinks, it's rare for him to be gone for so long. She thinks, he's not up to something, is he? She sits inside the carriage and thinks, I'm sure it's nothing. Let's not think about it. These are the streets I walked with Vibrato yesterday. Everything is the same, from the sound of music to the sound of people laughing. If there's one thing that's different, it's... Meanwhile, the driver comes and said, we've arrived. She steps out and Lennon said, hello, my lady. He touches her earrings and said, I've prepared a maid to help you get dolled up, but I see there's no need to. He said, you're already stunning as you are. He grabs her hand, asking, where do you think I'm taking you? She thinks, seeing how he's dressed differently from usual, it must be quite an important place. Is that where he's taking me? He turns towards her, saying, it's fine if you haven't thought about it. You'll find out soon enough. She thinks, where are we going? Suddenly she hears music and thinks, do I hear music? Lennon said, the answer to why I brought you here today is to attend a grand banquet with you. You'll be my partner for today. He said, you can only attend this banquet with a partner, you see. That's why I brought you here today. She thinks, but why? As the Duke's heir, Lennon could have easily brought a better partner than me. He asked her, Would you like to think about why I chose to bring you here with me this time? She thinks, is Lennon trying to make me frustrated on purpose? To get me to speak? He asked her, well then, shall we? Meanwhile she thinks, come to think of it, Lebrato said he was also attending a banquet today. She thinks, I wonder if it's the same one. Seeing them together, everyone gets silent. She thinks, why is everybody staring at us? Suddenly she saw Hayden standing there and thinks, is that Hayden? She squeezed Lennon's arm thinking, is he concerned that I'm here with Lennon? She recalls Hayden's words, all you have to do for me in return is to continue meeting Lennon Hills and promise to tell me his secret. She thinks, as much as Hayden wants to know Lennon's secret, I'm sure he's worried that Lennon might get a hold of his own secret. Meanwhile Lennon whispers in her ear, do not let their gazes cower you, and hold your head up high. He pulls her saying, you are here as the partner of the Duke of Hills's heir. No one here can look down on you. Do not be afraid of their gazes. She thinks, he thinks I'm nervous because of the crowd. Although that wasn't the reason, his words have put me at ease. There's no reason for me to cower in fear. After all, I've done nothing wrong. He whispers in her ear, look. That heartless younger brother of mine is ignoring me today as well. She thinks, fortunately, it appears he has no time to focus on us. He's busy socializing. But he looks awfully unwell. Does he feel uneasy conversing with others? The reason he's interacting with others despite feeling uncomfortable is probably, the only way I can become the head of my household is to surpass my elder brother. To become the next head of his household. On the other hand, meanwhile Lennon asked her, shall we head to the balcony? I think we've shown our faces long enough. She thinks, Lennon is at ease and doesn't feel threatened by his younger brother at all. They headed to balcony while she thinks, if Hayden is here, that means Lebrato should be here as well. I wonder where he is. Lennon said, how amusing. He asked, did you see everyone earlier? He said, even though they chose their partners with great care for their social statuses, in the end, my partner was the person they were most concerned with. Ironic, wouldn't you say? He said, they're all so curious about the partner of the heir to the Duke of Hills. If only they knew you were a commoner. He said, high society is so dull. It's predictable and boring. The one thing that isn't dull is being here with you. He asked, well? Have you felt the urge to speak recently? She thinks, I've had the desire to speak, but what I've been wanting more than that is to escape from this hell. I was able to feel the value of my existence thus far through my ability to listen to other people quietly. It's as if you were born to listen to others. But now that my sister has been sold off, there is no guarantee that I will be safe. What I need the most right now isn't the ability to speak but. She recalls Lennon's word, I'll pay you extra for your time today. To you, not your father. She thinks, money? He said, to think you still do not desire to speak. How unfortunate. He brushed her hairs asking, say, do you have clients besides me? She hesitates hearing this and he said, so you do. He said, you know, I do hope you can quit this job of yours. She thinks, why? He said, I don't want you to think your value comes only by sacrificing yourself. He said, now that I think about it, I've always thought I had to be useful for my existence to be of value. Even without sacrificing yourself, you're valuable just for being you. He said, I trust you. I know you won't give away my secret. She thinks, how does he trust me so much? Even when I received a proposal to reveal your secret. Lennon said, I can tell from your eyes. You have kind eyes, Ellie. She thinks, is that why you're always looking into my eyes? Meanwhile he asked her, can I kiss you? She nods her head and he smiled. Lennon kissed her. He said, I bring this up only because I'm jealous, but can I ask you one question? He asked her, who are your other clients? She thinks, I can't tell him that. He said, I see you won't tell me. Very well. Just promise me you'll only have me as your client from now on. I can give you the money you would have made with your other clients if you want. She thinks, money? That's right. If I want freedom, I need money. She writes on his hand, when will you give me the extra wages you said you would the other time? He laughed and said, how adorable. He asked, did you change your mind after hearing what I told you? She thinks, not exactly, but I do need money. He said, very well. I'll ask you another question, and if you answer it correctly, I'll give you twice what I promised you. My right-hand knight is at this banquet as well. All you have to do is find out who he is amongst those people. And just so you know, he's currently suspended. Hearing this, she thinks, suspended? He said, he's a loyal fellow, but he caused an accident because of a certain obsession of his. She thinks what Labrado said to her. I was lamenting while having a drink as I was suspended from work due to my obsession with hands. She thinks, don't tell me, did Labrado lick Lenin's hand? She thinks, so, Labrado really is here? Meanwhile, she noticed him standing there and thinks, oh, there he is. Meanwhile, he also noticed her. She thinks, did he see me? He comes to balcony and shouts, Master! What are you doing here? Lenin asked her, Labrado? How do you know Ellie? Seeing him there, Labrado asked, Our Lord Lenin? What are you doing here? He said, unbelievable. Meanwhile, Ellie points her finger towards Labrado. Lenin said, well, I feel like I've been played for a fool. He whispers in her ear asking, could it be that my lapdog is one of your clients? She thinks, I know it's best that I keep it a secret. But what should I do now that Labrado has already established that he knows me? Labrado asked, can you not see that you are making my master uncomfortable, Lord Lenin? He grabs her hand and said, Master, please come over. He pulls her, and she thinks, wait. If you pull me that hard, then. Accidentally they hugged and she thinks, here. He starts blushing and said, I apologize, Master. I didn't mean to pull so hard. Lenin said, Labrado, have you forgotten your position? What do you think you're doing in front of me? He said, I apologize, my lord. Lenin glares at him in anger and said, I don't care how you two know each other, but Ellie is here today as my partner. So get out of my sight at once. Labrado said, but. Lenin said, remember that I'm the one who decides when your suspension ends. Labrado said, I apologize, Master. I shall come look for you another time. She nods her head thinking, sure. Though I may have already left for somewhere else by then. We may have tried seeking salvation through each other. But as Lenin said, I no longer want to sacrifice myself. Because salvation is attained not through others but through oneself. Labrado left and Lenin grabs her hand saying, now that he's gone, tell me. He came clean to you about his odd sexual fetish, didn't he? She thinks, what should I do? She glances and thinks, so, right? She writes on his hand, pay me double since I answered your question correctly. He laughed and thinks, is this how she's trying to get herself out of this situation? He said, all right. I have lost fair and square. He said, whenever I talk to you, I feel like I've become a good person. I'm able to forget I'm a shameless wretch who kisses his stepmother. She thinks, but you already are a good person. She tries to speak, even though I'm a commoner, you've always treated me with kindness, and you even worry about my situation. She thinks, as I thought, I still cannot speak. I wanted to tell him that out loud. He asked her, shall we head back now that I've done what I came here to do? I'll take you home. She shakes her head thinking, I have to return home within the time my father had arranged with Lenin, but as the next head of his household, it's only right that Lenin stays here a little longer. He said then, at least let me walk you to the carriage. She thinks, I suppose that's fine. She thinks, I feel like I'm having a sweet dream on a midsummer night. However, a dream is just a dream. It's time I accepted the fact that my reality is not a sweet dream. Lenin said, something on your mind, Ellie? Ellie shakes her head and thinks, no, it's nothing. Lenin said, well, the carriage is waiting for you. Both sat down in carriage and Lenin said to the coachman, let's go. Ellie thinks in her head, this isn't what we agreed on. Get out. While chucking Lennon said, "Do you have a problem with this? If you do, you're free to tell me. You think I should remain at the banquet, don't you? But that's not what I want. What I want at this moment is to be with you." Ellie's heart raced and she said in her mind, "Lennon." Lennon said, "I apologize if you took that as a profession of my love. As I mentioned, the only time I don't feel dull is when I'm with you." Ellie thinks in her mind, "Why is my face feeling so hot?" Lennon said, "Though I suppose no one knows what the future holds. On that note, would you meet me again tomorrow?" Ellie thinks in her mind, "I feel the same way. I also wish to see you again tomorrow." Lennon squeezed her hand and said, "Thank you." He said, "Your assignment for today is to think about what we'll be doing tomorrow." Ellie thinks, "Another one?" Lennon said that aside, "Have you considered why I chose you as my partner?" Ellie closed her eyes and thinks, "Why did he pick me?" Lennon poked Ellie's cheeks and said, "As I keep telling you, I enjoy being with you the most." He said, "You didn't get the answer this time, but if you guess what we'll be doing tomorrow correctly, you can look forward to a reward." They stopped the carriage at a place, and while handing her the envelope, Lennon said, "Here. It's an amount you won't be disappointed with." And Ellie, Ellie thinks in her mind, "Does he still have something to say to me?" Lennon said, "I talked about many things in the carriage, but what I really want to tell you is that you should live your own life. Life is shorter than you think." Ellie thinks in her mind, "My own life? Do I even have one? But if I were to get the chance to live my life according to my own will instead of someone else's, I'd like to be able to use this money however I want." Next day, Ellie's mom called her. "Ellie, come over here." Ellie thinks it's not like mother to call for me. Ellie walked towards her mother, and she thinks she reeks of alcohol. She didn't always drink like this. When did she first start again? She tells right, "It was the day my younger sibling was sold. It was from that day mother started drinking." Ellie mother in Ellie's memories while crying she said, My child is gone. Don't you want to know where your sister is?" In present her Mantha said, "I saw Isabel by chance on the streets. She was with a fine young man wearing fancy clothing. She said I believe he had blonde hair? Anyhow, he seemed like a noble." Ellie thinks in her mind, blonde hair? Could it be Hayden? No. It's too early to jump to conclusions. I should find time to visit the town square as well. Her mother said, "Go off now. I'm going back to sleep." Someone shouted, banging the door, said, Master, your loyal lapdog has come to see you." Ellie's mother said to her, "When did you start raising a talking dog?" Ellie thinks in her mind, "I'm afraid that's a human man." Last night. Vibrato talks to himself, "Dear Mother in Heaven, I wish my master would become happy." He thinks in his mind, "She's like an angel with beautiful hands. Even after listening to my story, she was still so understanding. I wish she would smile every day." He thinks in his mind, "That reminds me, she was with my lord earlier. She must have met him as one of her clients. Lord Lennon seemed to have taken a liking to her. I wish she'd only be close to me. That's right. I'll head over to her estate tomorrow and cook for her. Then she might end up liking me more than Lord Lennon. If she's willing to be my master forever, she can stop this trait of hers." He thinks in his mind, "If only I hadn't touched the hands of that man known for being oversensitive, I would have been able to earn a large sum of money to give to my master. All right. There's no point in thinking about the past. I just need to think about my master from now on." Standing in front of the door, Vibrato thinks, "I know she has an appointment with another client, but surely she wouldn't shut the door in the face of someone who came to cook her breakfast. I just hope her client isn't that wretched Lord Lennon." Door opens and Vibrato said joyfully, "Master!" Ellie tried to make him quiet by putting finger on her lips. Ellie's mother said while leaning beside Ellie, My, what a burly young lad." Vibrato, while blushing, thinks, "Pardon?" She said, "This old heckler shall get out of your way, so enjoy your time together." Vibrato drops his vegetables bag shockingly and thinks, "Excuse me?" Vibrato asked Ellie, "Was that your mother, master?" He thinks I can't bring myself to look her in the eye. He said you must be starving. I shall start cooking right away. While chopping vegetables, Vibrato thinks it's gotten so awkward after what her mother said. I should try changing the subject. He said, I'm glad your father isn't around. I was worried I'd be turned away. Ellie thinks in her mind that would probably have happened if father were here, but he isn't. Since I'm hungry anyway, there isn't a reason I should ask him to leave, is there? Ellie thinks plus, I did want to try a meal made by Vibrato. After preparing meal, Vibrato said, Tada! All done! I cooked beef stew today. How is it? After taking a sip, Ellie's eyes sparkled and she thinks it's delicious. It's to the point where I think he's more suited to be a chef than a knight. Vibrato thinks this is different from my usual mornings, but I must say it's quite nice. Ellie tells to me, eating was nothing more than an act of survival. To think having a meal with someone could be this delightful. After a while wiping dishes, Vibrato said, to be honest, I had asked your father beforehand if I could meet you today. But he told me you already had a client. Ellie thinks you met my father? Vibrato said yes, he was at the tavern where I first met him. Ellie thinks in her mind I was wondering what he was doing since he hadn't been home for the past few days. Has he been at the tavern this whole time? Vibrato said, oh. Do you know who your client is today, master? It's not my lord, is it? Ellie thinks I do have someone that comes to mind, but... Lennon knocks on the door. Hello there. Ellie thinks so it really is Lennon. I'm glad he got here after Vibrato has left. Lennon said to Ellie, you didn't forget about our promise for today, did you? Ellie in her mind, promise? Lennon said, how, patting Ellie's head, I told you to think about what we would do today, but judging by your expression, it seems you forgot. It's fine. He said, after all, I get to have you all to myself for today. Let's go. Ellie thinks in her mind, come to think of it, Mother said she saw Isabel on the streets. While staring in the streets, she thinks, I wonder if I'll be able to see her today. Lennon said, looking for someone? He said, someone you have an unrequited love for, perhaps? He said, let me know if you need my help anytime. I'm capable of more than you think. Ellie tells herself, I'm pretty certain I'll be able to find where Isabel was sold off to with Lennon's help, but I can't ask him of that. She thinks in her mind, I wonder why. Is it because I don't completely trust him? Or because the man she was with could be Hayden? Lennon said, I'm not forcing you to. I just want you to know that I'm willing to help you if you want. Ellie gapes and said, do I need to give you something in return if I do? Lennon said while smiling, I'll think about that when the time comes. Ellie in her mind, our destination was the Duke of Hills's estate? She tells herself, is it all right for a commoner like me to come here this often? Lennon said, that's all for now. Be on your way. Lennon climbs on horse and said to Ellie, let's ride together. I wanted to ride with you until I started on my work. You see, I enjoy riding to clear my mind. Ellie thinks I have always wanted to know what it feels like to ride a horse, but I've never ridden one before. I wonder if I'll be fine. Both of them sat on the horse and Lennon says to Ellie, no need to be nervous. I'll go slow. Ellie in her mind thinks, I think I understand why Lennon rides to clear his head. She thinks the cool breeze on my face while riding in a quiet area feels so pleasant. Although, I must admit, sitting so close to Lennon is a little embarrassing. While Lennon satyrs at her, she thinks in her mind, stop looking at me and look ahead. Lennon said, are you asking me to look ahead? But I don't want to. Besides, given how slow the horse is going, it's not dangerous at all. But, he said, I enjoy looking at your pretty face more than the dreary garden. Ellie turns her head while blushing and thinks, and there he goes, saying such misleading things again. Lennon said while smiling, your face turned red. Ellie thinks, I feel someone else's gaze on me. Is that Hayden? Ellie to herself, Hayden is looking at us. No, he's looking at Lennon. That man Hayden talked about, could it be? Lennon's butler dashed towards him shouting Lord Lennon, and whispered to him, will be arriving shortly. Lennon said, what? Already? Ellie thinks in her mind, who are they saying will be here? Lennon said to Ellie, it seems the guest I'm meeting today will be here earlier than expected. Would you like to have a little chat before that? Ellie to herself in her mind while poking Lennon, come to think of it, there's something I've been meaning to ask him. Lennon asked Ellie, yes? Is there something you'd like to say to me? Ellis asks, is there someone you're in love with right now? He replied, I cannot love anyone at the moment. He says, right now, I'm in hell where I can no longer love anyone. Ellie says in her mind, me too. We're all in the same hell. There is Lennon, who cannot love anyone, me, who doesn't know what love is, and finally, Hayden, who is terribly lovesick. If this isn't hell, then what is? Lennon, while puttying Ellie, said it'd be nice if at least you could get out of this hell. Ellie points her finger towards Lennon, what about you? Lennon said, look at how late it's gotten. It's time for you to return home, Ellie. Ellie hears whispers and mutters and thinks, isn't this father's voice? Has he finally returned home? She heard her father saying, is it possible to make one blind without any physical disfigurement? Ellie choking thinks, what is he talking about? Someone replied to her father's voice, it may be possible if we carefully extract the eyeballs. If you believe that to be too extreme, we could always consider using poison, though it'd be more expensive. While trembling she hears, is there a poison that can make one permanently mute as well? Ellie thinks in her mind, he's thinking of turning me blind. Other person replied to her father's voice, why of course. There's a poison that damages one's vocal cords. Her father replied, I see. Can the procedure to extract eyeballs be done tomorrow? The other person replied, yes, it can. Ellie in her mind tells herself, I need to get out of this place. She tells my father, who made a large sum of money by exploiting me, is no longer the same person I knew. At this rate, I'll be stripped of everything I have except my ears and become a tool solely to make money for my father. Someone grabs Ellie's shoulder from behind. She turns. It's Hayden. He points to her to keep quiet and says, let's step outside. Ellie thinks to herself, what should I do now? Hayden said, I'm afraid I heard part of that conversation against my intentions. Allow me to help you escape from this place. He said, why won't you accept my help? While clenching his hands and yelling, he said, do you not understand the situation you're in? He said, I'm worried about your safety. Please allow me to help you. He whispered, please. Ellie thinks in her mind, I know exactly the kind of danger I'm in. The reason I'm refusing his help is because he wants to uncover Lennon's secret by pretending to help me. She thinks I don't wish to betray the first person who showed me kindness. And even if Hayden genuinely wishes to help me, I'm certain he's doing this to gain something out of me. He's no different from my father. Hayden says to Ellie, among all the women I know, you're the one who concerns me the most. He said, please believe me when I say I don't expect anything in return from you for my help. I shall come again tomorrow. I hope you'll give me a chance then. Ellie thinks, should I run away now? I'll take the money Lennon gave me that is in my room. And Ellie's comes to her and said, Ellie? What are you doing there? Since you're here, why don't you say hello to my guest? Her father's guest said, I shall come back tomorrow then. Ellie thinks, tomorrow? Is that the day I will lose everything I have? Ellie's father said, let's head inside now, Ellie. It's become cold at night. Ellie thinks in her mind, I don't have much time left. I need to get out of this hell tomorrow, no matter what. Ellie thinks I can only leave once father falls asleep, but it seems he's still drinking. What should I do? Forget it. Since father leaves for work early in the morning to the Baron's estate, I'll make my escape then. She tells somehow, I feel relieved. It would have been nice if I had left sooner. I thought there was nothing I could do other than listen to others. I believed it was only right for me to lead such a life. She thinks, but I'm confident I'll regret it forever if I continue living this way. She tells, this is my last chance. Even if I'm a doll that's incapable of doing anything, I need to try, at least. All I need to take with me is the money Lennon gave me. She thinks the only thing I have that holds any meaning and that I cherish is the dress Lennon gifted me. After all, It was the first time I tried on and was given such a beautiful dress. But as someone who will be on the run, such a dress doesn't suit me. Little by little, I'll try getting further away from here until I'm out of my father's reach. Those 3 men may try to find me, but all they want is mute Ellie, someone who will not disclose their secrets. It's only right that I end things with them here. Ellie opens her eyes and says, Huh? Where am I? He's the man I saw yesterday. Is he, trying to remove my eyes? She shouted no. While laying on her bed she tells herself, oh, it was just a dream. Wait a second. Did I just say no? She sat on her bed and thinks, was it my imagination? No, I don't have time to be upset over this right now. I must escape today, no matter what. She thinks father should have left for work by now. It looks like I woke up just in time. How walking, she thinks, now that I've packed my money. She heard her father's voice asking her, are you finally up, Ellie? She thinks, why is father still home? Her father said I quit my job of cleaning up after that damned Baron yesterday. She thinks in her mind, what? Now that I'm to become a doll that makes large sums of money, he won't need to work under someone's thumb anymore, is that it? She thinks, how trembling, no. I can't live like this anymore. I have to escape. She tells her sect to act naturally. Her father said, where are you going, Ellie? She points towards the door. He said, are you going to the garden? She tells herself in her mind, since I often spend my time in the garden, I'm sure father won't suspect anything if I. Her father said, I'll come with you. You haven't forgotten to ask for my permission before heading outside, have you? She thinks in her mind, it's all right. I'm sure I'll have another chance. I just have to escape before that man arrives. While working in garden, Ellie thinks he hasn't taken his eyes off me this entire time. I only need him to look away for 1 second. While she was thinking, her mother shouted to her father, Darling! Come in here! He replied, Wretched woman. What is it? Her mother said, it's urgent. Just come in for a second. Hurry! Ellie tells herself, this is it. Now's my chance. While running, she tells herself, just a little more. Ellie heard her father's voice from behind. Ellie? Where do you think you're going? He shouted, Ellie. Her father, while running after her, shouted, Ellie. Stop right there. Ellie thinks in her mind, today's my last chance. She remembers her father's conversation from last night. Can the procedure to extract eyeballs be done tomorrow? She thinks he may execute the plans he made yesterday. If he catches me here, while panting, she thinks I will end up as a doll only capable of listening. I don't want that. She stops running and thinks while coughing, I can't run any further. She hears her father's voice. Ellie! Where are you? Ellie! She tells herself, I can't give up like this. I need to hide somewhere. She saw alley and walked towards it while thinking over there. She stops there and in her mind prays, please, please don't come here, please. She hears her father's voice, Ellie. Your old father can't keep up if you run off like that. While walking away from her father, she thinks in her mind, what do I do? Her father said, now, Ellie, let's go back home. Ellie bumps into someone and says in her mind, a person? Whoever you are, please help me. Her father said, Ellie, that's enough. It's impolite to bother someone you don't know. While crying with fear, Ellie hopes, please, help me, please. Ellie shouted while crying, help me. The other person replied, you want me to help you? The other person asked Ellie's father, are you this young lady's father? Her father replied, yes, we simply had a minor argument. I'd appreciate it if you'd let us be. Ellie shakes her head and tells in her mind, no. Don't believe him. Ellie's father, while rushing towards her, thinks, now's my chance. The other person grabs her father's hand and said she clearly said no. Ellie's father said, she is my daughter. Who are you to interfere in our business? I suggest you walk away while I'm still being nice. Ellie's father think in her head, how brazen for a scrawny fellow. The other person said, oh, is that so? And kicks Ellie's father, and he fell down. The other person says to Ellie, let's go. Are you coming? You're not actually feeling sorry for that poor excuse of a father, right? Ellie thinks in her mind rather than feeling sorry. I feel a rush of relief. Goodbye, father. Ellie walks away with the other person. Ellie, while waking with the other person after watching Carriage, thinks this person is a noble. The other person said, would you like to come with me if you don't have a place to go? Even if you don't want to, it's probably best to ride with me briefly. Your father may come after you again. Ellie thinks, as much as I'm afraid of getting caught by my father, is it all right for me to follow a complete stranger? I don't even know what they look like. The other person asked, are you hesitating because I seem suspicious? After uncovering her face, she said, well, does seeing my face ease your suspicions a little? I promise in my family's name and honor that I won't harm you. Ellie, in shock, thinks, huh? She looks exactly like me. The other person said, do you know your eyes make people want to help you? Even if that isn't your intention, I think your eyes are beautiful nonetheless. Ellie thinks in her mind she does, but her eyes are much more beautiful than mine. Ellie tells, as if entranced by her striking resemblance to me, I found myself riding in her carriage. The other person said to Ellie, you've had a life full of hardships, haven't you? It's all right to cry and let it all out. If you want, I can lend you my shoulder. Ellie thinks while crying, I can feel her warmth. This isn't a dream. After 17 years, I've finally escaped the clutches of my father. The other person said to Ellie, I think fate brought us together today. You see, I've been looking for someone who looks like me for the past few years. What? After some time they arrived at Countess's home, and Hardwin, Hannah's brother, asked her, so you finally found her? She replied, just when I'd given up and was about to return home, I ran into her like it was fate. Meanwhile, Ellie wakes up from sleep, thinks, where am I? Oh, I fell asleep after crying in the carriage. Hardwin asked, have you told her about your situation? She replied, not yet. How could I when she fell asleep after crying her eyes out? It seems she's been through a lot. She can't even speak properly. Hearing their conversation, she thinks, should I get up? No, I should pretend to be asleep for a bit longer. Hardwin asked Hannah, do you honestly believe someone who can't speak can pretend to be you? She replied, sure. Keep your voice down. You're going to wake her up. Meanwhile, Ellie thinks she says that, but her intense gaze is making it impossible for me to keep pretending to be asleep. She peeks, thinking, I should just get up now. She raised, and Hardwin, seeing her, asked, oh, are you awake? Hannah said to her, I believe your name. She recalls the moment when her father shouts her name while chasing her, Ellie, that's enough. It's impolite to bother someone you don't know. She asked her, was Ellie yes? Hannah sits beside Ellie, saying, it seems I have yet to introduce myself. With a smile on her face, she introduced herself, I'm Hannah Fever. While introducing Hardwin, she said, and that man looking at us with a disgruntled look is my younger brother, Hardwin Fever. Hardwin said, it's a pleasure to meet you. While pointing her finger towards Hardwin, Hannah said, I'm Countess Fever, and Hardwin is my little puppet. She asked her, as much as I'd like to hear your story first, you can't really speak, can you? Ellie nods, and she said, how pitiful. Hannah said, then, allow me to tell you my story first. I understand it's sudden, but I'm afraid I don't have a lot of time. She said, I could possibly die in 2 weeks. Hearing this, Ellie gets shocked and thinks, what? Hannah said, if I were to die, my title as Countess would be inherited by someone else. She said, our parents passed away early, and with no other siblings, Hardwin should, by right, inherit my title. However, due to an imperial law that states that one can only inherit a title when they turn 18, Hardwin can't inherit my title as he is still 17. She sighed while saying, he can only inherit my title when he turns 18 next year, but I don't have that much time. At this rate, my title will be inherited by one of our wicked cousins who can't wait to get their hands on my status and wealth. That's why I've been searching for someone who looks like me for the past few years. Someone who can pretend to be me until Hardwin's 18th birthday. Squeezing Ellie's hand, she said, Ellie, I promise to give you anything you want. She asked, will you please pretend to be me until Hardwin can inherit my title? Hearing this, Ellie thinks, money will certainly help me live a new life. Plus, this will provide me with a place where my father can't reach me. It's an offer that greatly benefits me. Hannah said, if you don't like the sound of my offer, you're free to leave any time. But you need a place where your father can't find you, right? She said, if you stay here and pretend to be me, nobody will know that you're Ellie. Ellie thinks, but can I really pretend to be her when I can't even speak? Hannah raised while asking, since it's late, why don't you get some sleep while giving my offer some thought? Hannah said, it's a little late, but welcome to our estate, Ellie. While laying on bed, Ellie thinks, Countess fever. I've never heard of that name before. I wonder how far this place is from my home. She sighs and thinks, that aside, it seems I lost the money Lennon gave me. What will happen if I run into father again? Meanwhile, someone knocks at the door. Hardwin said, it's me, Hardwin fever. Are you awake? While moving towards the door, she thinks, Hardwin fever? Does he have more to say? She opens the door, and Hardwin was holding a candle. He asked her, may I come in for a moment? Ellie nods her head. Hardwin placed the candle on the table and sits on the bed, saying to Ellie, have a seat. She gets shocked and thinks, what is he doing? Hardwin gives her shoes, and seeing them, she thinks, white slippers. Hardwin said, I'm not sure if they're the right size. I simply brought the ones I thought would best fit. Ellie thinks so. I didn't even realize I was barefoot. While Hardwin helps her to wear those slippers, she thinks, I never expected him to be so considerate, as he seemed indifferent earlier. Could it be that he's actually a thoughtful and warm person? She was lost in her thoughts while Hardwin asked her, why aren't you trying them on? They're new, so don't worry. She wears the slippers and thinks, they fit perfectly. Hardwin said, I apologize for the thoughtless way my sister acted. He said, you only just met us, so I realize it's difficult for you to understand our situation at once. He asked, if you don't mind me asking, what happened to you that made you into such a state? She thinks, I want to answer him, but I can't speak. While standing, Hardwin said, you don't have to answer me. I wasn't expecting one in the first place. He turned, saying, I'll take my leave now. You should get some sleep. I'm sorry if I woke you up. While leaving, he suddenly stops, saying, oh. He turns, saying, don't forget to wear those shoes tomorrow. Hardwin left and closed the door. Ellie thinks he smiled. She thinks, if I become Hannah Fever, will I be able to keep seeing that smile? She fell asleep and had a dream where Hardwin said, Ellie. He touches her face and she thinks, huh? Hardwin? This must be a dream. He leans to kiss her while she thinks, there's no reason for him to kiss me otherwise. Meanwhile, Hardwin changes to Lennon, and he said, Ellie. Where are you right now? She gets shocked and said, Lennon? Meanwhile, she wakes up with the effect of shock. She gets relieved, thinking, it was just a dream. Next morning, Hannah, sitting in garden, said, I have an incurable disease. Hearing this, Ellie thinks, an incurable disease? Ellie starts writing something on a paper. She writes, does that mean there's no cure? Hannah nods and said, it's similar to a hereditary disease, and the outcome is inevitable. The only blessing, if you can call it that, is that it's not physically noticeable. She said, I was born with a weak heart. My father also passed away at an early age from a heart disease. I tried strengthening my body to live longer. But other than being able to throw a good punch, it didn't make much of a difference. I've almost died a few times from not being able to breathe properly. She said, right now, my heart is beating very slowly, as if it were to stop at any second. That's pretty much my story. She asked her, what about you, Ellie? Why aren't you able to speak? You're not a mute, are you? Ellie starts writing, I've gotten so used to not talking that I've forgotten how to speak. Reading it, Hannah asked, do you wish to speak now, though? Ellie nods. Hannah smiled and said, as long as you have the will, I don't think speaking again will be a difficult task. After all, you did ask me to help you yesterday. So, have you reached a decision regarding my offer? Ellie thinks, to be honest. It's not that I don't want to, but I'm not confident enough. Until now. I've only done as I was told. Will I be able to deceive others perfectly? Hannah said, all you have to do is show others that Hannah Fever is alive. Hardwin will handle all the other complicated matters, like interacting with others. As I told you, he's my puppet, and you can always trust him to do a fantastic job. Ellie drops her head down while thinking, Hardwin. Hannah said, I do hope you can reach a decision soon, Ellie. Meanwhile, Hardwin comes and said, stop pestering her. How do you expect her to decide in a day? They both turns to see him. Seeing him, Ellie thinks, Hardwin? Hannah asked him, how many days should I give her then? Hardwin said 2, at the very least. Hannah said, that was Hardwin's attempt at a joke to make you laugh, Ellie. You should laugh even if it's not very funny, or he'll get upset. Ha! Hannah asked him, that aside, what brings you here to the garden? He replied, I came to give you a letter that was delivered to your name. He gives her the letter and she said, well, that's unexpected. You're usually not this kind to me. Let me take a look. She opens it and starts reading. Hannah said, to think a dying woman like me would receive an engagement proposal. Ellie thinks, an engagement proposal? Seeing the letter, she thinks, it's a familiar pattern. Hannah asked her, would you like to know where it's from, Ellie? She gets shocked while hearing, it came from the Duke of Hills's estate. Ellie thinks, there is Lennon, the heir of the Duke of Hills. Then Hayden, the Duke's second son, who is jealous of Lennon. And finally Librato, a knight working at the Duke of Hills's estate, who serves Lennon. I thought I would never be involved with those men again, but maybe I'm bound to them by the twisted strings of fate. She thinks, what do I do if I see them again? Between Lennon and Hayden, I wonder who proposed an engagement with Hannah. Hardwin asked Hannah, so what are you going to do? Hannah said, it's a shame, but I'll have to decline. He stares at Ellie while she thinks, what a relief. I hope Hannah and Hardwin never find out about my involvement with the Duke of Hills's household. Hannah said, Hardwin, your intense stare is making Ellie uncomfortable. I understand she's beautiful like me, but refrain from staring too much. Hardwin said, stop spouting nonsense. Hardwin turns and Hannah said, he can be cold sometimes, but he's sweet and kind deep down. Hannah asked Ellie, shall we talk more inside? How does a glass or two of wine sound? They went inside and Ellie thinks, when Hannah drank, it seemed as if she momentarily forgot that she was terminally ill. However, it pained me to see how she only talked about the past rather than the future. Even in her inebriated state, she knew her end was coming soon. Hannah said, Ellie, talking to you for the entire day like this. Hannah fell asleep saying, makes it seem like I really have a younger sister. Ellie thinks, my shoulder suddenly feels light. I also smell something nice. Hardwin offers her a blanket, and she thinks, Hardwin? He starts mumbling, She thinks, was he trying to cover me with a blanket? She tries to speak, thank you for taking care of me. A slight word comes out of her mouth, Har. She said, Hardwin. They both get shocked. Hardwin asked her, did you just say my name? He asked her, can you try saying it again? Ellie thinks, will I really be able to do it again? He said, take courage, Ellie. Though faint, you undoubtedly said my name. Ellie tries to say his name, a little word comes out of her mouth, ha, and Hardwin said, again. She tries again and said, Har. He said, a little more. She finally managed to speak and said, Hardwin. Hardwin said, you did it. He starts smiling and said, you do know how to speak. He pats her and brushes her hairs with his hand. Her hairs got messy and Hardwin said, oh, sorry. I was just so proud of you that I. He asked, would you like to go to bed now? She nods. Hardwin asked, instead of nodding, why don't you try answering by speaking? He said, try it out. She thinks while brushing her hairs, why does Hardwind so strongly believe that I can speak? Why does he trust me so wholeheartedly? Is it because I look like his sister? She thinks, though I don't know why, Hardwind's trust gives me the courage to keep trying. Tears drips from her eyes while she said yes. Seeing her crying, Hardwind gets shocked and she thinks, oh no! Why am I crying? Nervous, Hardwind said to her, why are you crying? Someone might think I made you cry. Those are happy tears, right? She replied yes. He pats her while saying good. From now on, answer with a smile rather than tears in your eyes. He picks Hannah and said, I'll take my sister to her room then. She said yes. Hardwind left with her sister, and she sits there alone. She thinks, it's lonely to be alone after having so much fun together. I thought I was used to being alone, grin, but a couple of days with the Fever siblings have changed me. Suddenly Hardwind comes back and opens the door. Seeing him, she thinks, why is he said good? After being hesitate, he managed to said good night. He left and she thinks, did he come back just to say that? Ellie starts giggling and thinks, how adorable. She went to her bed and lost in her thoughts again. She thinks, Hannah's proposal. I was so focused on running away that I had no other plan in mind. I never dreamed I'd run into such an unexpected person and receive an unpredictable offer. Unlike me, Hannah most probably expected such a day to come. If one of Hannah's cousins were to inherit her title as Countess, would Hardwind be chased away from this place filled with memories he has with his sister? Hardwind gave me courage. I don't want to see him upset. Should I take up Hannah's offer? If I become Hannah Fever, it'll benefit all three of us. The Fever siblings will get what they want. And I'll have the money to run away somewhere where no one can find me. I've got nothing to lose in this scenario. Next morning, Ellie, wearing a yellow dress, was sitting on the sofa. Hardwind knocks at the door saying, it's me, Hardwind. May I come in? She opens the door and thinks, seeing Hardwind's face, He doesn't look very well. She thinks, did something happen? She tries to ask him, something, pen. With tears in his eyes, he said, it's Hannah. They went to Hannah's room and Hardwind tells she's having trouble breathing. Hardwind asked Hannah, are you feeling better now? Hannah, sweating from fever, said, it still hurts. She said, I thought I was never going to open my eyes again. Meanwhile, Ellie thinks, in the past, but she seemed lively just yesterday. Ellie hugs Hannah for consolation. She pats her, thinking, I didn't know because she only showed me her bright side, pat pat, but I can see it now. She thinks, Hannah is afraid of dying. I want to bring her a little peace of mind. Ellie tries to speak, you are, still, alive. Hearing Ellie speaking, Hannah gets shocked and asked her, Ellie, did you just speak? Ellie nods and said, why you will be, fine. With a smile on her face, she said, I'll accept it. Hardwind gets shocked and Hannah said, Ellie. She said, I'm so relieved. Thanks to you, I can leave this world in peace. Everything turned out well, so why am I crying? It took 2 days, just like you said, Hardwind. After some time, Hannah asked Ellie, can you tell us your story now, Ellie? She tries to say, one word at a time. I slowly began to tell my story. I told them how my father was planning on making money off me by removing my sight and voice. As I was still not used to speaking, I could not give the Fever siblings a detailed explanation. However, I could tell them the important facts, excluding details of what happened between me and the Duke of the Hills household. Hannah gets furious after hearing about her parents and shouts, to think such a parent actually exists. She asked, was he out of his mind? She shouts, if you want, I can help you punish your father. Hardwind continues staring Ellie. Ellie thinks, I'm fine, so please don't make such a face. Hannah said, since you agreed to help me, it's only right that I tell you more about me in detail. More about Countess Fever. Even though I am a member of high society, I rarely attended any social gatherings. My heart would often hurt without warning, and I couldn't stand talking about trivial matters at banquets. So nobody will know even if you pretend to be me, Ellie. However, there's a banquet coming up that the Empire is hosting, which I must attend to show that I'm alive. So I'd like you to go in my stead and dance to just one song with Hardwin. Hearing this, Ellie and Hardwin gets shocked. Hardwin nervously asked Hannah, "Why me?" She replied, "We can't have another man hold Ellie's hands now, can we? We're the only ones who know she's pretending be me." Hardwin said, "Don't get the wrong idea, Ellie. It's not that I don't wish to dance with you." Hannah starts laughing and said, "Oh, Hardwin, you're so silly." Ellie raised her hand saying, "But I don't know how to dance." Hannah and Hardwin starts laughing and said, "You can always learn how to dance." Hardwin said, "You had me worried for a second." Ellie tells, "We laughed like people who had forgotten all their sadness and hardships. But deep down, I knew this happiness wouldn't last forever. It was bound to come to an end one day." After that day, Hannah's condition got drastically worse. It made me think she was holding out until now, for Hardwin's sake. That her heart was supposed to cease beating much earlier. But because she couldn't leave this world before handing her title over to Hardwin, her heart continued to beat until she found someone who looked like her. And now that she has found me, all her strength has disappeared. Hannah asked Ellie, "Ellie, could you stay with me tonight?" Tears comes from Ellie's eyes and she hugs Hannah saying, "Of course. I'll sleep by your side tonight." I never knew what it felt like to be close to someone. But I think I know what that feels like now. Thought the time I've spent with her has been short. Hannah has taught me how delightful it can be to talk with people. Hannah asked Ellie, "Is there someone you love, Ellie?" She replied, "No." Hannah asked, "So you've never experienced love before? How unfortunate." Ellie asked, "Is it something I should?" Hannah replied, "Definitely. Love is a wonderful thing." She said, "Though I've rarely attended social gatherings, I've been in relationships with many men since I was young. Since I knew I was going to die at an early age, I wanted to experience everything I could so that I wouldn't leave with any regrets. I hope you'll meet a man you genuinely love one day." Ellie asked her, "What does love feel like?" Hannah said, Love is right. Love is when your ordinary, everyday life becomes special. It gives meaning to everything. But it's all right. You don't have to know what that feels like yet." I thought Hardwin was the only one who had never experienced love before. But I guess you're the same as well. These days, I can't help but think Hardwin is living an unhappy life because he cares for me too much. I'll be dying soon, and all I hope for is Hardwin to be happy without me around. Ellie squeezed her hand saying, "I'm sure that'll come true." Hannah asked, "How can you be so sure?" Ellie said, "Because that's what you're wishing for." Hannah smiled and said, "I see." She said, "Now that I think about it, that does make sense. Hardwin is my puppet, after all." Hannah said, "Can I ask you for one last favor, Ellie? Please look after Hardwin for me in my absence." Ellie replied, "I will." Meanwhile she thinks, "Please don't speak as if you're leaving us soon." Hannah said, "Hardwin is more tender-hearted than you think. If he cries when he thinks of me, dry his tears for me, will you? He may seem level-headed, but he often wavers. When that happens, tell him that it's all right. He's frequently misunderstood as he's not very friendly. But I want you to know at least how warm he is." Ellie thinks this feels like she's saying her last farewell. She hugs Hannah saying, "I will, let's talk more with Hardwin tomorrow." Hannah said, "Okay." Ellie had a dream. I had a long dream. I was walking in a garden, holding hands with the Fever siblings. Underneath the clear sky, with a healthy Hannah and a smiling Hardwin. I thought it was just a happy dream. It was just a dream, but I suddenly had a strange feeling without any particular reason. It felt as though Hannah would disappear forever. After that dream, she wakes up with tears in her eyes. She noticed Hardwin sitting beside them. Seeing him, she asked him, "H. Hardwin?" She raised and asked, "When did you?" Suddenly she freezes and turns to see Hannah. Seeing Hannah, she thinks, could it be? She gets shocked and shouts, "Hannah!" While trying to awake her, she pushed her, shouting, "H. Hannah." She thinks, "Please open your eyes. Tell me I'm wrong." She starts crying and said, "Hannah, please wake up." Hardwin said, "Ellie, stop." Ellie shouts, "Hannah!" Hardwin said, "She's gone." He hugs her with tears in his eyes. He said, "It's all right, Ellie." He said, "Don't cry." Ellie tells, while Hardwin was holding Hannah's funeral, "I didn't take one step out of her room. I couldn't bear to see Hannah's body being buried in the cold ground. And starting today, I had to start living as Hannah Fever." She thinks, "I pray you rest in peace, Hannah. I wonder if her funeral went well. What do I do from now on?" Hardwin comes and knocks the door, saying, "It's me, Hardwin. May I come in?" She opens the door, and he enters. She thinks, it's only been a day, but he looks completely drained. He asked her, "Can I sleep with you just for tonight?" He said, "I promise I won't do anything." He said, "I'm too afraid to close my eyes. No matter how hard I try, I can't seem to fall asleep alone." While on bed, Hardwin asked Ellie, "Are you asleep?" She replied, "Not yet." He starts crying and clenched her hands, saying, "Her sheets still smell like her. It's as if she's right beside me. While I was holding her funeral today, I had a sudden thought. Why did my sister have to be born with a weak heart, while I was born healthy?" He said, "That thought keeps haunting me." Ellie turns towards him, saying, "It's not your fault." He said, "I'm scared. Why do people have to die so meaninglessly?" He touches her hand, saying, "But why you are alive, you are able to remember Hannah." He said, "You're right. I'll stop crying." She said, "As long as we remember Hannah, she'll continue to breathe and live in our hearts forever." When I woke up in the morning, Hardwin was already gone. I wonder where he went. Where can I go to find him? She opens the door at the same time as Hardwin was behind it, just starting to knock. He said, "There's a place I'd like to go with you." He asked her, "Would you come with me?" While walking, she thinks, when did the weather get so cold? She thinks, I should have brought along a coat. Hardwin glances at her. Hardwin stops at a place and she gets confused. He said to her, "Since I was the one who invited you here, it'd be troubling if you caught a cold." She thinks, how did he know I was feeling cold? Hardwin is a very thoughtful person. I realized that when he gave me these shoes. Hardwin gives his coat to her. On arriving at their destination, she thinks, This is where Hannah is buried. Hardwin smiled and said, "It's the flower garden my sister and I have tended to together since we were young. Ellie, you can come here whenever you miss Hannah. You're welcome here any time. I hope you will come here occasionally and remember my sister." He brushed her hairs, asking, "You said so yourself, didn't you? That as long as we remember Hannah, she continues to live in our hearts." Ellie said, "Thank you for showing me this place. I hope we can come together again next time." They returned and Ellie said to him, "Hardwin, there's one problem. There are maids who have seen me." He replied, "Not to worry. Only 2 maids have seen you. Both have been working for the Fever household since they were young, and they knew about Hannah's illness. They also helped with her funeral, so you may rest assured. From now on, those maids shall assist you." She said, "I see." Ellie tells, in other words, Hardwin trusts them both, and they're aware that I'm the fake Countess. He said, "Speaking of which, Ellie, what do you think about dropping the formalities with me?" Ellie thinks, "So suddenly?" He said, "We are the same age, after all. And you'll be pretending to live as my sister. It's not right for a countess to speak with formalities to her puppet." She thinks, I guess he's right. She smiled and said, Okay then. Hardwin laughed and said, Good. We should start talking to each other more from now on. That way, you'll get used to speaking without stuttering. She replied, Okay. Seeing him, she thinks, he seemed downhearted just yesterday, but I'm glad he looks more cheerful now. A maid comes and giving a letter to Hardwin, he said, A letter has been sent to her ladyship. Seeing the letter, he gets confused and thinks, Again? She asked him, What is it? Giving the letter to her, he said, A letter from the Duke of Hills's household. While opening the letter, she thinks, Is it a letter regarding an engagement proposal? She thinks, I don't know what the letter is saying. She starts reading the letter thinking, Let's try piecing together words I know. Fever Estate, make a personal visit. I would like to hear in person why you turned down my engagement proposal. Reading it, she thinks, just as I thought. I wonder who sent Hannah the engagement proposal. Lennon? Or maybe it's Hayden? Let's see, the sender is. She gets shocked when she reads the sender name, Lennon Hills. Hardwin asked her, What does it say, Ellie? She replied, He'll be making a personal visit. She clenched her hand thinking, Will Lennon really be making a visit here? I didn't think I'd see him again this soon. She thinks, Will I be able to stay calm when facing Lennon? Can I successfully pretend to be Hannah Fever instead of Ellie in front of him? She starts trembling while thinking this, and Hardwin noticed her. He leans towards her asking, Something happened between you and the Duke of Hills's household, didn't it? She starts sweating and thinks, I tried to hide it, but I guess I failed. She thinks, Did he catch on back then? He said, You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. But just remember that as of now, you're Hannah Fever, not Ellie. He said, No one can know that you're Ellie. She thinks, That's right. I promised Hannah. Although I didn't know her for long, I want to keep the promise I made to her. I mustn't forget that I am Hannah Fever now. She nods while saying, I'll make sure no one finds out. Hardwin asked, And to do that, what's the first thing you should do? She thinks, The first thing? Learning basic etiquette? He said, You should start by learning how to speak properly. She said, Oh. Okay. She asked, So, when did he say he'll be visiting? Hardwin smiled and said, In a week. For the next 6 days, I practiced speaking with Hardwin regardless of the location. I had to focus on keeping the conversation going for as long as possible, and speaking more fluently. Apart from that, I also practiced the basic etiquette a noblewoman should display. Although Hardwin had stopped crying since that night, he didn't seem as cheerful as before. Will I ever get to see his cheerful side again? While sitting in garden, she said, Hardwin, she thinks, maybe talking about Hannah will cheer him up. While having a fantastic tea, he replied, Yes? She asked him, Have you really never been in love before? She said, That's what Hannah told me. She said you're a pitiful person who's never been in love before. He replied, It looks like she said more about me than I'd like. She said, So it's true? He replied, There's just never been someone I wanted to fall in love with. He asked her, What about you? Have you ever been in love? She replied to him with a no. She said, I've never had the peace of mind to fall in love. He asked her, That aside, Lennon Hills will be visiting tomorrow. Will you be all right? She nods, saying, Yes. As much as I didn't want Lennon to come, we didn't have the power to turn down a visit from the heir of Duke of Hills. He comes, and seeing him from window, she thinks, He's really here. She mumbled, saying his name, Lennon Hills. Meanwhile, he noticed her, and she gets shocked. She thinks, I think our eyes met. What do I do? No, calm down, Ellie. You're not the Ellie who has to listen to him talk anymore. She thinks, since Lennon is meeting Hardwin today, all I have to do is wait here. She walks around one corner to other in worry. She thinks, Is Lennon still here? I'm feeling really parched. She opens the door and peeks outside thinking, I know Hardwin told me to wait here, but... She comes outside thinking, Where has the maid gone? She was just here a moment ago. It's too dangerous to walk to the kitchen like this. I should return to my. Meanwhile, Lennon sees her and asks, Ellie? She gets shocked and gets freeze at a place thinking, Lennon? She tries to go, but Lennon grabs her arm. He gets shocked and said, Ellie? She thinks, if I don't answer correctly here, he'll know I'm Ellie. It's all right. You can do this, Ellie. She said, I'm afraid you have the wrong person. Meanwhile, she thinks, I am no longer the mute Ellie I once was. Lennon gets shocked, and she thinks, it feels somewhat satisfying to see Lennon, who kept a straight face even when I discovered his secret, look at me with such an expression. She thinks, let's push him a little further. After all, I'm Hannah Fever right now. She said, oh, I suppose you're Lord Lennon, who wrote that he'd be visiting today. I apologize for the late introduction. Meanwhile, Hardwind comes and interrupts them, saying, What are you doing out here, Hannah? I told you to wait inside until I came to find you. Ellie apologized, saying, Sorry. Hardwind said to Lennon, I believe our conversation ended earlier, Lord Lennon. Lennon said, I apologize. It appears I've mistaken her ladyship for someone I am looking for. Ellie turns, eyeing, I am Hannah Fever. If that is all, meanwhile he grabs her arm again. Seeing this, Hardwind gets angry but remains silent. Lennon said, I came here hoping to meet you, my lady. I understand Lord Hardwind met with me instead as you were feeling ill. He said, seeing as how coincidence no, as how fate has brought us together, could you spare some time and have a cup of tea with me? She thinks, I'd like to turn him down. But even if I avoid him today, Lennon would do whatever he can to meet with me again. She said, if it's just a cup of tea, then very well. They sits in front of each other, and had some tea. She thinks, is he using this opportunity to observe me? She picks the cup and drinks, thinking, I should focus on dispelling Lennon's suspicions for now. I need to behave like a noblewoman and not a commoner. Lennon also picks the cup, saying, Allow me to apologize for the late introduction. I am the son of Duke of Hills, Lennon Hills. Ellie said, It's a pleasure to meet you. She, noticing him, thinks, is this what real nobility is like? Despite the gesture being the same, he exudes a completely different aura from me. But something feels strange. He's behaving as if he wants me to see. It's like he's trying to say that no matter how hard I try to appear like a noblewoman, I'll always be Ellie, a commoner. Hardwind glanced and said, As I informed you earlier, my sister has a severe respiratory condition. He said, I hope you understand that she is unable to speak much. Lennon said, Of course. I'll keep today's conversation short. He said, We can always talk more once her ladyship has fully recovered. In that regard, I would like to help her ladyship get better. He asked, Would it be all right if I visited from time to time? After having tea with them, Lennon leaves. She thinks it feels as if a storm had passed. She asked Hardwind, Are you upset? She thinks, he doesn't look happy. Is Hardwind angry at me? Is it because I went out to the corridor despite being told to wait inside? Hardwind said, It's swollen. She asked, Pardon? He said, Your wrist is swollen. She said, Oh. You're right. He said, Lennon Hills, I don't like him one bit. Exactly how hard did he grab you? He stands and went somewhere. He comes back with a box and she thinks, a medicine case? He puts a bandage on her hand, saying, This will help cool the area down. He said, You can remove it once you feel better. She said, Okay. He said, And if anyone tries to grab your wrist from now on, tell them. How rude of you to grab a lady's wrist without permission. He asked her for confirmation, Okay? She starts laughing and he said, Don't laugh. I'm serious right now. She said, All right. He said, Try repeating what I said. She said, How rude of you to grab a lady's wrist without permission. He said, Excellent. He hesitates while asking, Can I pat you on the head? She nods. He pats on her head while she thinks, Even though it hasn't been that long since I started speaking again, it already feels awkward to nod instead of giving a verbal answer. Just a few months ago, I had no will to live. With no desire to eat or do anything, I lived my life for the sole purpose of staying alive. But my life has completely changed after meeting the Fever siblings. Now I want to speak. I want to repay Hannah for saving me, and I want Hardwin to be happy. She thinks, it finally feels like I'm alive now. She said to him, "Thank you for taking care of my swollen wrist, which I didn't even know about, and for making me feel alive." With a smile she said, "Thanks, Hardwin." Seeing her smiling, he said, "Ellie, if you smile that brightly." He stands and starts to leave, and she asked, "Leaving so soon?" He said, "You should get some rest." She gets confused and thinks, did Hardwin feel burdened by my expressions of gratitude? After some time they went outside. She asked Hardwin while sitting next to him on ground, "Now that I think about it, there are many things I still don't know about you." He asked her, "Is there something you'd like to know?" She thinks, he gave me his coat again, even though I'm wearing one today. She asked him, "When's your birthday?" He replied, "November. I was born on the first snowfall of the year." She said, "It suits you." He asked, "What do you mean?" She said, "Your hair. It reminds me of the snow." He asked her, "What about you? When were you born?" She replied, "March. I was born on the last snowfall of the year." He said, "Your hair is also like the snow, Ellie." Seeing her hairs, she thinks, "Is it?" He said, "It looks like we were born on the first and last snowfall." She said, "You're right. I wonder when it will snow this year." He said, "I always watch the first snowfall with Hannah." She asked him, "Can I be the one to watch it with you this year?" He replied, "Of course." Unfortunately, my wish that these peaceful days would continue was short-lived. Because Lennon visits again, and she said, "I'm afraid your visits will not help me get better, my lord." Lennon came to visit me again the next day. He said, "Why do you think that, my lady?" "I brought some tea from the western region that's good for the lungs." She said, "I appreciate the gesture, but..." She sighed and thinks, talking this much still makes me breathless. Lennon said, "You seem to have trouble speaking, my lady." She raised, saying, "I'm fine. I'm afraid I won't accept your visit so easily next time." She thinks, I wish he'd stop showing interest in Hannah Fever. She tries to leave, saying, "Now, if you'll excuse me," but she grabs her wrist again, saying, "Wait." She shouts, "How rude of you to grab a lady's wrist without permission." He smiled and said, "I apologize. I simply wished to speak a little longer with you." He asked, "Could you please spare me a little more time?" She sits again, saying, "Only for a short while then." He said, "Thank you." Servant comes holding cups of tea and said, "Please enjoy your tea, my lady, my lord." She noticed the maid blushing and smiling while seeing Lennon. She thinks, did she just smile? She usually never smiles. It's probably nothing. She said, "I'd like to know why you're showing me such kindness." Meanwhile she thinks, why is he so fixated on me when Ellie's disappearance is something favorable for him? He asked her, "May I tell you a story from my childhood?" He said, "Among my younger brother's attendants, there was one around my age. Although he was not my attendant, we would have short conversations whenever we met. We were similar in age and also shared similar interests. One day, an item my younger brother cherished disappeared. He became very upset and created a huge commotion. The culprit they assumed to have stolen the item was the attendant I was close to. I was certain there was some misunderstanding." Hearing his, she thinks, "I see, why is he telling me this?" He continues, "However, I was afraid to stand up for the attendant. I was young and didn't want my father to resent me. And so? I chose to remain silent, but it ate away at my conscience. After a few days, I had finally made up my mind to help the attendant. But he was already dead. I was told that Hayden, my brother, killed him with his own hands. He was cruel even from that young age." Hearing this, Ellie thinks he did seem used to people getting killed. Was it because of that incident? Lennon said. At that moment, I felt a great sense of guilt. If only I had decided to help that attendant a little sooner. Since that day, I've had trouble ignoring matters that weighed on my heart. And recently, I met a woman named Ellie. He said she was a pitiful woman who couldn't speak. Her father only saw her as a tool for making money. I made her aware of her situation and what she could do to get out of it. I was thrilled when I saw her relying on me. However, she ran away. I don't usually show kindness to others very easily. The reason I'm showing you kindness is because you greatly resemble that woman. She asked him, Are you saying you've shown me kindness solely because I remind you of that woman? He replied, Yes. Though it's the truth, I suppose that might have been unpleasant for you to hear. She said, Very much so. He said, I apologize. As you wish, I shall stop visiting you. Hearing this, she thinks, he's changing his mind so suddenly? He raised from his seat saying, I simply wanted to tell you everything on my mind as I've decided to stop visiting you. He said, Thank you for listening to what I had to say. I shall leave now, my lady. Lennon leaves and she saw him leaving from window. Meanwhile, Hardwin comes and asked, How was your conversation with Lennon? Did anything happen? She turns and said, No. She said, He said he won't be visiting anymore. He asked, Really? Though I find it hard to trust him completely, I'm relieved he said that. She noticed the maid talking to Lennon. She thinks, come to think of it, Lennon is skilled at handling people. He will stop at nothing to find out my true identity. Based on what I witnessed earlier, it's clear that the maid who knows my identity has feelings for Lennon. She gets shocked while thinking, what if Lennon were to seduce her? Hardwin asked her, Ellie? She turns and said, Hardwin, I have a bad feeling. He said, Don't worry. I told you, didn't I? I'll never put you in a troubling situation. She said, I think Lennon might be trying to lure that maid away. The one who knows I'm not the real Hannah. He glanced at her saying, I thought she was someone I could trust. He asked, Should I send her away for a while? I doubt she'll have any complaints if I send her someplace far away with enough money to live off of for a year. She shakes her head saying, Lennon would surely notice that. She thinks he has enough power and money to find that out. She grabs his hand saying, I'll try to resolve this, Hardwin. She smiled and said, In a way Hannah would have. Hardwin said, This somehow feels strange. She asked him, Did I offend you? He replied, No, quite the opposite actually. It feels as if you're taking after a positive trait of Hannah's. She asked, A positive trait? He said, trying to resolve the problem directly instead of avoiding it. She asked him, Do I seem like your older sister? He laughed and replied, What? Of course not. He said, You're completely different from her. She said, Oh. I'm sorry. I won't act like that from now on. He said, That's not what I meant. He said, What I meant was that you're you, Ellie. I don't see you as a replacement for Hannah. She asked him, Don't I remind you of Hannah since we look alike? He replied, You do, but that's the end of it. He said, Since the day I met you, you've always been Ellie to me. After some time the maid was cleaning the bed and Ellie was sitting on sofa. Maid comes to her and said, Allow me to pour you a hot cup of tea, my lady. Ellie thinks, I believe her name was Madeline. While she was leaving, Ellie said, Madeline, I appreciate all your work. She gets confused and turns. Ellie said, I hope you'll feel more comfortable around me. Maid said, Thank you for your kind words, my lady. Ellie thinks, I believe that's what Hannah would have said. I came up with 2 methods to resolve this matter. The first was to form a bond with Madeline. I don't believe Madeline would disclose my secret that easily to Lennon. However, since there could always be unforeseen variables, I've decided first to try to get Madeline on my side. While laying on bed, she thinks the second method is to confront Lennon directly. Though it's risky and requires that I be the perfect version of Hannah, I'll keep seeing him until he is convinced that I'm not Ellie. She thinks, I wonder why Lennon is looking for me. If I reveal who I really am to him, Will he tell me his true intentions? She was thinking, maybe Lennon. Meanwhile, someone knocks at the door. She asked, Who is it? Hardwin said, It's me, Hardwin. She allows him to enter, and he sits beside her. She asked him, Is something the matter? She replied, No, I was just worried about you. He said, Lennon doesn't seem like someone we should take lightly. She thinks, I guess he's been worried since I told him I'd take care of this. She said, I'm planning on building a bond with Madeline. Getting closer to her might reduce the possibility that she'd reveal my identity to Lennon. He said, Then maybe it'd help if you knew more about her. She nods. He said, Madeline was almost sold to a brothel as a child. It was Hannah who saved her. She brought Madeline back here and looked after her like an older sister. And at times a friend. Madeline, who was skinny and weak, soon put some meat on her bones, and not long after, she started smiling. He said that is why Madeline swore her loyalty to Hannah. She said, I see. She thinks that explains why Hardwin places so much trust in her. I don't blame him. Thinking back to when I was feeling hopeless and alone, and in a gutter without a single ray of hope, that hand that reached out to help me felt like a true blessing. Hardwin said, Though I want to trust Madeline, I'm not entirely confident anymore. But I'm sure getting closer to Madeline would be helpful for you, Ellie. She asked him, Are you sleepy? He replied, Yes, a little. She asked him, Would you like to lie here with me? He starts blushing hearing this. He turns her face shouting, Ellie. That's. She said, What's wrong? We lay together back then, too. He said, That's. She said, I only ask because I enjoyed our time together that night, but if you don't feel the same way, he said, All right. You're making me feel bad. While laying on the bed, she thinks, to think Madeline had such a painful childhood as well. Given how Isabel and I went through something similar, I empathize with her. She asked Hardwin, Is it all right if I ask for a favor, Hardwin? He asked, What is it? She said, Do you think you could help me find my sister? She said, I believe my father forced her into marriage for money. Hearing this, he gets shocked and asked, What? He gets furious and asked, Your blasted father even sold your sister? She replied, Yes. She said, All that frowning's making you ugly? He said, I won't waste my breath speaking ill of your father. I'm just glad you came here before it was too late. She said, Me too? Meanwhile, she thinks, Hardwin's such a sweet person. I'm glad I'm here too. I'm grateful to have met you and Hannah. Hardwin asked her, Will you tell me some things about your sister that can help me find her? Ellie said, Okay. My sister is. She recalls her mother's words. Isabel was with a fine young man wearing fancy clothing. She thinks, I wonder if I can tell Hardwin about this. He said, I'll find your sister no matter what it takes, Ellie. And once I do, she may stay here with you if she likes. Ellie said, I don't know how to thank you, Hardwin. He said, You don't have to. But if you really want to, can you tell me about your relationship with Lennon? She said, As I told you before, my father made me listen to Lennon's secrets for money. Since I couldn't speak, his secret would be safe with me. That's all. She asked, Is he trying to find me because he's afraid I'll leak his secret? He said, I don't think so. He said, If you asked me, I believe he has feelings for, never mind. Ellie said, He does not have feelings for me. He said, So you heard what I said. She said, The feelings he has for me are probably closer to sympathy and curiosity. She thinks, even though I'm a commoner, Lennon always treated me with kindness. He was always considerate of me and genuinely hoped that I'd speak one day. Maybe I've been overly wary of Lennon. He could help me with my current circumstances if I tell him the truth. She asked him, What do you think about telling Lennon about my identity? He replied, No. He said, Although Lennon may have good intentions, it's never good for many people to know a secret. She said, Okay. He said, You listen really well to others, don't you? She said, Only because it's you. Hearing this, he starts blushing and said, "Oh." He raised from bed and Essie asked, "Hardwin?" He said, "It's time I took my leave." She asked, "Why? Did I say something wrong?" He replied, "And no, not at all." He said, "Oh, right. The banquet hosted by the Empire is right around the corner. You'll have to start practicing dancing with me tomorrow. That's what I initially came here to tell you." He leaves saying, "Good night then." She thinks while laying on bed, he left in such a hurry. Touching the bed from where he was lying, she thinks, it's still warm. She falls asleep thinking, I wouldn't have minded him sleeping here tonight. Next morning, Ellie was drinking tea with the maid. She said, "I didn't have the opportunity to express this until now, but I'm really glad that you came into this household, my lady." She said, "You may not know, but I'm forever in debt to House Fever." Ellie said, "I see." Ellie thinks, it has been a week since I decided to become closer to Madeline. Through our many conversations, I learned more about her. Currently 15, she was only 5 when she came to live at Countess Fever's estate. In other words, she had spent the past 10 years with the Fever siblings. The reason Madeline seemed strangely familiar the more I looked at her was because she resembled my younger sister, whom my father had sold off. That was 10 years ago. When I asked Madeline if she remembered anything from before she was 5, Madeline said maybe it was from the shock of being sold off, but I don't remember anything before then. She thinks she denied having any memories. Ellie said, "Thank you for keeping my secret. I trust you, Madeline." Madeline said, "Please rest assured that I will assist you until Lord Hardwin inherits the title of Count." She raised, saying, "If you don't have any other tasks for me today, may I take a quick trip to the town square? I have some personal business to see to." Ellie said, "Of course." Madeline said, "Thank you, my lady. I promise I won't take long." Ellie thinks, personal business? She asked Madeline, "Can I ride with you to the town square?" She asked, "Will you be all right?" Ellie said, "Yes, if it's for a short while." Meanwhile, she thinks, something feels off. They both sits in a carriage and leaves for the town square. Ellie thinks while sitting in the carriage, this is my first venture outside since arriving at the Countess's estate. She thinks, will I be all right without Hardwin here? They reached town square and Madeline said to her while leaving, "I shall see you back at the estate, my lady." Ellie thinks, rather than Madeline, I'm more concerned about Lennon, who's been silent for a week. He doesn't seem like the person to give up like that. Let me just check who Madeline is meeting up with. She steps forward and reaches the place from where Hannah saved her from her father. She thinks this is the main street where I ran away from my father. She clenched her hand thinking, I wonder if he's still looking for me. While thinking, no, let's not think about that any longer, she bumped into someone. Her hat blows with air and she thinks, my hat. The person grabs the hat saying, my. You ought to be more careful. Hearing his voice, she thinks, this voice. It was Lennon, and he said, Countess Fever. Lennon, while holding Ellie's hat, said, you ought to be more careful, Countess Fever. Ellie, while shocked, looks at Lennon and thinks Lennon Hills. Then Lennon said, what brings you here, my lady? While handing Ellie's hat to her, Lennon said, it's dangerous to travel alone without a maid or a knight. While putting her hat back on her head, Ellie said, I was just on my way back to my carriage. She glances where Madeline was going and thinks, I need to go after Madeline. She's disappeared already. She sighed while thinking. Then Lennon asked, is bumping into me so bad that it calls for such a deep sigh from you, my lady? Ellie asked, what brings you here, Lord Lennon? He said, I'm actually in the midst of finding something. If it's all right, I'd like to escort you back to your carriage. Ellie thinks in her mind, trying to get something out of Lennon might be a better idea than trying to find Madeline. Ellie nods and said, very well then. Both of them started walking. While walking, Ellie glances at Lennon and asked, were you here to meet someone? Lennon replied, no, I'm afraid not. Then Ellie thinks in her mind, Does that mean Madeline didn't come here to meet Lennon? Ellie asked, may I ask what you're looking for? Lennon replied, it delights me that you're curious about me. Lennon recalls Ellie in his mind and said, do you remember the woman I talked about who resembles you? Ellie said yes. Lennon said, that's who I'm looking for. I really wish to see her again, you see. I searched the entire capital for her using every means possible and finally found a witness. The woman I'm looking for has silver hair, and the witness told me he saw 2 women with silver hair getting on a carriage about a month ago. Not only that, but the day he witnessed those women is roughly around the same day the woman I'm looking for disappeared. Lennon glances at Ellie and said, upon hearing that, I could only come to one conclusion. While long at Lennon, Ellie said, and what is that? Lennon grins and said, one of those 2 women is the one I'm looking for. Ellie gulps in shock. Lennon said, from that day on, I started looking for the carriage the 2 women were seen getting on. I questioned all the coachmen in the capital. Lennon said, are you curious as to what I found out? While Ellie clenches her hands, Lennon said, well. He said, I shall tell you about it the next time we meet. Ellie turns and started walking. She said, I'm afraid there won't be a next time. While looking at Ellie, Lennon said, that's something no one can be certain of. Ellie flinches and thinks in her mind, why is he so set on finding me? Ellie stops and turns her head towards Lennon and said, I'd like to ask you something. Why are you looking for this woman? Is it simply because she disappeared without a trace? Or could it be that you have feelings for her? Lennon replied while looking sad, it's because her disappearance invoked a sense of loss in me. To be honest, I'm not that upright of a person. You see, the thing I truly desire is something vile. And every time I did something foul to achieve that, I felt empty inside. He remembers his moments while Ellie counseling him. He said, however, that emptiness disappeared after meeting that woman, Ellie. She would even console me for what I'd done. That's why I enjoyed being with her. He closes his eyes and looking happy, he said, it's hard to say if I'm looking for her because I have feelings for her. After all, even I do not know if my feelings for her are friendship, sympathy, or love. He said, I simply wish to know if she's safe and would like to talk to her again. Ellie asked, do you miss her? Lennon said, yes, very much so. Ellie thinks in her mind, was I someone that important to Lennon? She looks at Lennon and thinks, but at the very least, I think he's telling the truth about missing me. Ellie reaches and grabs Lennon's hand and he gets shocked. She said while looking at him, I hope you find her one day. While looking sentimental, Lennon said, Countess fever. Ellie said, however, do try to understand her circumstances for having to disappear so suddenly. After all, she's someone you cherish, isn't she? She thinks in her mind while looking at him, so please stop making things hard on me. She leaves Lennon's hand and said goodbye, Lord Lennon. Lennon then said, I'd like to see you again. Ellie turns the other way and said, I'll discuss that matter with Hardwin. Well then, dash. She hears a voice shouting, Lord Lennon. She thinks in her mind, this voice, it's Librato came and said, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for you. Ellie, while shocked, thinks, Librato Lance? While looking at Librato, she thinks, what is he doing here? Librato looks at her while Ellie thinks, I need to leave before he sees. Librato quickly comes in front of her and said, Master? Ellie pulls her hat down while hiding her face. She thinks, oh no. She tries to avoid Librato, but he stops her both times. Oh. Ah. While turning away from Librato, Ellie said, how impertinent. Please step aside. Librato gets shocked and said, did you just speak? He leans in front of Ellie to see her face. Then Ellie said, what is the meaning of this? While kneeling, Librato said, Master. Ellie thinks in her mind, but Librato was suspended. Is his suspension already over? While holding her hat, Ellie thinks, I never imagined they'd be together. What should I do? She looks at Lennon and talks in her mind, don't just stand there. Help me. Librato said, Master, where have you been? He asked, why are you pretending not to know me? Did I do something to upset you? While kneeling, he started crying and tears drops from his eyes to the ground. He said, if you tell me what it is, I promise not to do it ever again. He looks up towards Ellie and said while sobbing, so, please, don't pretend not to know me. Please don't abandon me. Ellie looks at him and thinks in her mind this is more troubling than running into Lennon. She, while sitting down, thinks in her mind, but I doubt I can hide my real identity from Labrado. After all, a loyal dog always remembers their master's scent. Ellie grabs Labrado's chin and said, I'm afraid that's a secret. She whispers, it's not polite to cry in front of a lady you just met. It seems you were confused as I greatly resemble the person you're looking for. Labrado replied, yes, master. Ellie thinks in her mind, dummy. I just told you it was a secret. She said while sighing and closing her eyes, I'm Countess Fever, not your master. If you stop crying, I shall forgive your impudence. While wiping his tears, Labrado said, yes, I apologize. Ellie stands up and looks towards Lennon. Lennon said, it seems my attendant has been rude to you. Allow me to apologize in his stead, my lady. Ellie turns and started walking. She said, that's quite all right. I shall leave then. After a few moments while sitting in the carriage, Ellie thinks in her mind, did I do the right thing? Although I didn't directly reveal my identity, what I did was no different than telling him I was Ellie. While remembering Labrado's crying face, she thinks, but how could I possibly ignore him when he was crying out to me so desperately? After that, while lying on the sofa, she thinks I have no choice but to hope I made the right decision. She heard a sound and opens her eyes. While Hardwin was carrying blanket with both of his hands, she said, Hardwin? Hardwin gives blanket to her and said, oh, sorry. I didn't mean to wake you up. She said, it's all right. Why are you back so late? Hardwin scratches his forehead and said, oh, well, what color do you like? Ellie thinks in her mind all of a sudden. She said, purple, I suppose. While taking a sigh of relief, Hardwin said, purple? What a relief. Ellie said, why? What is it? He said, well, the banquet is in 2 days. And your dress. While they were talking, someone knocks on the door and shouted, Lord Hardwin. Countess Fever. Both of them gets confused. Hardwin opens the dewey and asked, what's the matter? Madeline replied, there is a man desperately searching for his master at the estate gates, my lord. Ellie flinches while Hardwin asked, master? Madeline said yes, and he is insistent on seeing Countess Fever. Madeline asked, what shall I do, my lady? Ellie recalls Labrado in her mind and thinks, I guess the inevitable has come. I didn't think it'd be this soon. She said, can you show him to the drawing room, Madeline? And let him know I'll be with him shortly. Madeline said, yes, my lady. Hardwin, while confused, asked, master? Ellie, do you have an odd hobby I'm not aware of? Like raising a man, never mind. Ellie replied, I didn't raise him, but I suppose you could say I took him in. He used to be one of my clients, and I ran into him earlier in the day when I visited the town square. Hardwin gets shocked and said, you went to the town square today? Ellie replied, for a short while. But only because something came up. Sorry. She said, don't worry. I'll take care of him, Hardwin. He's different from Lennon. While putting his hand on his chin and in worry expressions, Hardwin said, let's say that he is. But why is he calling you master? Ellie quickly stands up and said, let's head to the drawing room for now. While fake laughing, she said, as for why, I'm afraid I can't tell you as it's something personal. She thinks in her mind, what if he's disappointed that I won't tell him the truth? If Hardwin turns his back on me? Hardwin pat Ellie's head and said, I understand. It's his secret, after all. I don't expect you to tell me about it. He said, but promise me you'll reflect on your hasty decision to tell him about your identity. Ellie said, I will. I'm sorry. Ellie opens the door. Both of them enters the guest room. Labrado quickly stands up and gets excited, said, master. Hardwin shipers to Ellie, master? What is he, a dog? Ellie whispers, he might very well just be one. She said, have a seat, Labrado. Labrado sits back on sofa. While laughing, Ellie said, see? Ellie and Hardwin sits on sofa. Then Hardwin said, I'm Hardwin Fever, and I am currently looking after Ellie. Labrado said, I am Labrado Lance. I'm a knight who works for House Hills and serves Ellie as my master. Ellie glances at Hardwin and thinks in her mind the way he said that makes it sound like I'm a member of House Hills as well. Hardwin said, while I cannot tell you about our circumstances in detail, I can tell you that Ellie is currently pretending to be my sister, Hannah Fever. Labrado said, I'm aware. Hardwin glares at Labrado and said, do you have any intention of disclosing this piece of information elsewhere? I suppose you wouldn't say it to our faces even if you do. Labrado quickly stands up and kneels in front of Ellie. Ellie, while surprised, said, Labrado? He tugged a chain holding a ring from his neck. While presenting it to Ellie, he said, you don't have to tell me everything, master. I won't ask why you're pretending to be Countess Fever. With sparkling eyes he said, all I want is to stay by your side. I swear to you upon this keepsake from my mother that I'll never betray your trust. He said you were the first person to ever accept me for who I am without any judgment. I know just how kind you are, master. Ellie puts her hand on her chest while he said, why would I ever betray someone so important to me? Ellie talks in her mind, I can't be certain if it's me that Labrado likes or my hands. But I do know one thing for sure. While she grabs the chain, Ellie said, don't worry, Labrado. Ellie puts the chain back around Labrado's neck. While surprised, Labrado said, master. She tells him, I trust you. She thinks in her mind Labrado would never betray me. She turns her head towards Hardwin and asked, is that all right, Hardwin? Hardwin replied, very well. But I can't trust him wholeheartedly just yet. Sir Labrado, you said you worked for House Hills, correct? Does that mean you're associated with Lennon Hills? Labrado replied, yes. He's the lord I serve. Hardwin said, so there's a possibility that he knows you've secretly come here. How can I know he won't use that against you to tell him about our secret? Labrado said, you don't have to worry about that. When I ran into my master earlier today, Lord Lennon was also present. He said he's aware of how fond I am of my master. He recalls the incident in his mind and said, although she denied she was Ellie, I have no doubt Lord Lennon knew that, given my tendency to become fixated, I'd do whatever it takes to find my master. While putting his hand on his chest, he said, therefore, Lord Lennon would find it more odd if I didn't come here to look for her. While Hardwin glances at Ellie, she said, Labrado, you? She thinks in her mind, aren't as mindless as I thought. I almost said that out loud. While it looks like Labrado is wagging his tail, he said ahem. Since this matter involves you, I mulled over it carefully. Hardwin said while interrupting him, even so, I am unable to trust you fully. However, if you agree to do what I ask of you, I shall trust you more. While both Ellie and Labrado looked surprised, Hardwin said, I'd like you to spy on Lennon Hills. Hardwin recalls Lennon and Ellie's moments in his mind and said, I want you to find out the extent of his suspicions about Ellie's identity, and the means he's using to look into us. Ellie glances at Labrado and thinks in her mind, even still, asking a knight who not only works for House Hills but is also Lennon's right-hand man to spy on Lennon is quite an unreasonable Labrado excitingly said, of course. When should I start? Ellie, hearing Labrado's answer, thinks in her mind, seems like I guessed wrong. Hardwin then said to Labrado, do you not have any pride as a knight? Labrado leans his head down and said, I cannot serve two people at once. The person I'd like to pledge my loyalty to. Labrado kisses Ellie's shoe. While shocked, Ellie shouted, Labrado. Labrado looks up at Ellie's face and said, is Ellie? If I cannot serve you, there's no point in me working as a knight. He blushes and said, you are all that I want, my lady. Labrado said, my loyalty to Lord Lennon was never deep to begin with. I solely wanted to observe him from a close distance, you see. If I may, there is something I'd like to ask of you as well, Lord Hardwin. Hardwin asked, and that is? While excited, Labrado said, once everything is settled, please appoint me as the Countess's guard. That's all I ask for. Hardwin glances at Ellie. Ellie said, you can rest assured, Hardwin. Labrado won't bite the hand that feeds him. She thinks in her mind he'll just kiss it is all. Hardwin gets confused and thinks in his head. Ellie said, given the time, I suggest you return for tonight. Let us meet again next week at a different location. I expect to hear your findings on Lennon Hills then. I shall decide whether or not to accept your request based on what you have found. Librado's mood drops and he said, yes, my lord. Ellie grins and pat Librado's head. Hardwin quickly grabbed Ellie's hand and said, it has gotten awfully late. I believe you should return now. Librado slowly and with heavy steps leaves. Ellie glances at Hardwin, while he sighs and thinks in her head Hardwin seems really upset. She recalls the moments in her mind and thinks it must be because I went to the town square and told Librado about our secret without his permission. And because I patted Librado on his head? She grabs Hardwin's hand and squeezes it, and said, I promise I won't act again without discussing it with you first, Hardwin. The reason I went out today is... She explains everything to Hardwin. Hardwin said so it was you who ran into Lennon, and he told you he would let you know what he found out the next time you two met. Hardwin take a sigh and asked, Can you answer me this, Ellie? Am I currently your guardian? She replied while Hardwin grabs both of her shoulders, yes. Hardwin said, then let me say this as your guardian. With a worried look on his face he said, please be more aware of your surroundings. Ellie asked, do you mean Librado? But all he wants is to pledge his loyalty to me. While Hardwin looked stunned, she said, I'm not asking you to trust him right away. But at the very least. Hardwin grabs Ellie's hand and started walking. After forcefully opening the door, while Ellie is confused, he walks in. He forced her down on the bed. Ellie is confused, and while looking up towards Hardwin's face, she thinks in her mind, Hardwin? While Ellie is blushing and confused, Hardwin said, how much do you trust me? Ellie said, I. Hardwin cheeks gets red and he said, do you have any idea what's on my mind right now? Ellie talks in her mind, although I trust Hardwin the most, I couldn't even guess what he was thinking about at the moment. Hardwin, while looking at Ellie, said, see? You don't know anything. While getting back up from Ellie, he said, so, don't trust people too much. Hardwin sighed while covering his face with both of his hands. I'm sorry. I went overboard. Ellie gets back up and sits beside Hardwin and said, it's all right. Hardwin said, I promise I won't do that ever again. But I hope you'll be more wary of others, Ellie. People aren't as kind as you think. Ellie taps Hardwin's arm and said, does that include you as well, Hardwin? She said while looking at his face, you barely knew me, yet you gave me a pair of slippers and the courage to speak. Doesn't that make you a kind person? Hardwin said, but I also just scared you earlier. Ellie smiles and said, it wasn't scary at all since I know how warm and sweet you are. She said, besides, I know you only did that because you knew I wouldn't have listened if you were gentle about it. Aren't I right? Hardwin asked Ellie, have you ever been hurt by someone you trusted before? He remembers his memories with his uncle and said, after my father died, my uncle took great care of my sister and me. However, the truth was that he was plotting to take over the title of Count for himself. While trembling, he said, I trusted him the most after my sister, and yet... Ellie said, I trusted my father as well. Never in my dreams did I think he tried to steal my sight and voice. While looking at Hardwin's face, she said, that's why I think I know how you feel. She said while tugging his shirt, come here, Hardwin. Let me give you a hug. Hardwin gets blushed and surprised. Both of them hugs each other. While hugging, Ellie said, I know it may be difficult, but I'd like you to trust me. And I'd like to trust you too. How long do you think it'll take for us to trust each other wholeheartedly? Both of them are smiling while looking at each other. Ellie said while sitting, how long do you plan on standing there, Hardwin? Come and have a seat. While awkwardly walking, Hardwin tries to sit and said, right. After sitting, he said, sorry about yesterday again. I reflected on my actions all last night. Ellie said, as I told you, I'm fine. You don't have to worry about it. That aside, what brings you here? While scratching his chin, Hardwin said, oh, remember how we practiced dancing for the banquet that'll be taking place tomorrow? Ellie said, yes. She recalls her memories of practicing dance in her mind. Ow. Step ouch. Stomp out. She thinks in her mind I spent most of the lesson stepping on Hardwin's toes. Hardwin said, well, I thought we could do one last practice. I brought over the dress you'll be wearing tomorrow. Will you come to my room after changing into it? The maid came with the dress. Ellie nodded and said okay. After getting ready in the dress, Ellie stands in front of mirror. She said to herself while looking in the mirror, what a beautiful dress. She talks in her mind, while if Hannah were alive, she would have worn this, wouldn't she? She imagines Hannah wearing the dress and talks in her mind she would have looked so lovely. While walking, she talks in her mind, for Hannah I have to play her part tomorrow perfectly. While knocking on the door, Ellie asked Hardwin, it's me. May I come in? Hardwin replied, yes, come in. Ellie slightly opens the door and gets in. She blinks shy looking at Hardwin and thinks, oh my. How dashing. Hardwin said, you're here? He walks to Ellie and said, Ellie? Ellie gasps and thinks in her mind I kept staring at him without even realizing it. She twirls with her dress and asked, what do you think? Do I look like Hannah? Hardwin replied, no, you look like Ellie. But people who don't know you will definitely think you're Hannah. He said while looking at her, the dress looks lovely on you. Ellie asked, did you pick it out yourself? Hardwin replied, I did. He remembers last night's moments in his mind. What color do you like? Purple, I suppose. Purple? What a relief. Well, the banquet is in 2 days, and your dress. Ellie thinks in her mind, so that's why he seemed so relieved at my answer. She said, thank you, Hardwin. I really appreciate it. While reaching to grab Ellie's hand, Hardwin said, no problem. Shall we start dancing now then? Both of them looks at each other while looking and holding each other's hand. Hardwin said, you still remember, don't you? All you have to do is follow my lead, all right? Ellie nodded and said yes. Hardwin said, relax and focus on me. Ellie talks in her mind while dancing with Hardwin. This is strange. For some reason, I can't seem to focus today. While dancing, Ellie staggers and stomps on Hardwin's shoes. Ellie blushes and said, how about we take a break? She talks in her mind, the feeling of your hand on my back seems to be all I can think about. While her heart is racing and beating fast, she talks in her mind, so I can't focus on my dancing. Hardwin also blushes and said, Ellie? Ellie talks in her mind, Hardwin, why am I feeling this way toward you? Lennon opens his eyes in a dark place and thinks in his mind, where am I? It's so dark. He heard a voice saying, Lennon. It's a girl, while the girl's face is not showing. The girl reaches and grabs his hand. It's Ellie. She smiles while looking at Lennon. In the next moment, Lennon blinks and wakes up. He rises up and puts his hand on his face and thinks in his mind, it's that dream again. He said, Ellie? He talks in his mind, since when did I start caring so much about you? Ellie tells Lennon Hills has always preferred casual relationships. Deep relationships that demanded responsibility were too burdensome for him. Due to his strong possessiveness, he had to get his hands on whatever he wanted, no matter what. It wasn't particularly difficult for Lennon Hills to do so, thanks to his exceptional looks, skills, and family background. However, even the seemingly perfect Lennon had one flaw: he got tired of things he had very easily. Despite all that, there was one person he hadn't gotten sick of. The night guard said to Lennon, as expected, Sir Librado visited Countess Fever's estate last night, my lord. While glances at the guard, Lennon said, did you look into what they talked about? While bowing, the guard said, I'm afraid I couldn't, as it happened inside the estate. My apologies, my lord. Lennon said, never mind. You may take your leave. Lennon sits on chair and thinks in his mind, Hannah Fever. He thinks while picturing Hannah in his mind, a countess who rarely shows her face at social gatherings and is always surrounded by disturbing rumors. The people who made up the baseless rumors that she's hideous and has peculiar preferences are much more disturbing. Marriage was never on my mind, but the constant stream of marriage proposals began to wear on me. As such, I wanted to get engaged to someone I knew wouldn't cause any trouble. Someone who wouldn't seem to fall genuinely in love with me. He thinks while picturing Hannah in his mind like Hannah Fever. Not to mention, she looks a lot like Ellie. He talks in his mind while holding a paper. I believed it would also be an interesting proposal for the Countess, as she was past the ideal age for marriage, but while looking angry he thinks in his mind declining my proposal without so much as stating a reason. As I was already in a state of unrest from being unable to find Ellie, I wanted to personally meet Countess Fever to hear why she turned down my proposal. He remembers in his mind Hardwin said it is because she is gravely ill. While sighing he thinks in his mind I can't believe she'd send her younger brother in her stead. Hardwin said I'm afraid my sister is currently suffering from an acute respiratory disease, which is why she will not make a suitable wife for you, my lord. While explaining, Hardwin said that's why I have come in her stead today. She has trouble speaking due to her condition, you see. I ask for your kind understanding, my lord. While walking in the hallway, Lennon thinks in his mind since she's ill, there is no point in me clinging to this proposal any longer. A shame, indeed. She seemed like an intriguing woman. The door in front of him opens while he's thinking. I can't ever forget that very moment. While Ellie comes from the door, Lennon saw her and started telling feet that were hesitating to take a step forward, and a head slightly bowed. Silver hair cascaded to her waist that framed a forlorn and innocent face. Without a doubt, I knew she was Ellie. Lennon, while shocked, said, "Ellie?" He walks to her and grabs her hand and said, "Ellie." Ellie retreated and said, "I'm afraid you have the wrong person." While shocked and confused, Lennon thinks in his mind she's not Ellie. While both of them are standing, Hardwin comes. Hardwin asked, "What are you doing out here, Hannah?" Lennon turns his head and looks at both of them and thinks in his mind, is she really Hannah Fever? Was I simply mistaken? While looking at Ellie he thinks in his mind, unlike Ellie, this woman is clearly speaking. But can two people really look this alike? From that day on, Lennon started looking into anything connecting Ellie to Hannah. And thanks to his thorough investigation, he was able to learn that someone had seen two silver-haired women getting inside a carriage. Someone knocked on the door and asked Lennon, "Are you in there?" While sitting on chair, Lennon said, "Yes, come in." Lennon's stepmother comes in with her maid. She sits on sofa while her maid poured tea in cups. She said, "Well, come and have a seat." Lennon asked, "What brings you here, mother?" She said, "While drinking tea you haven't visited me recently, and that's made me quite upset." Lennon sits on sofa and while closing his eyes he said, "Oh, mother, I've simply been too busy." She asked, "Have you gotten yourself a new woman? How long do you plan on playing around with this one? A week? Or two, perhaps?" While Lennon was drinking tea, Lennon puts the cup back on table and said, "Who knows how long it'll last?" She said, "Just don't hurt her too much. Keep that up, and one day, you might end up hurting just as badly." In a mockingly manner Lennon said, "Don't worry, mother. There will never be a day where I'm the one hurt. I know better than anyone else how not to get hurt, you see." Lennon stands up and started walking. He said, "If there's nothing else, I'll be taking my leave." While walking he thinks in his mind, the old me would have fooled around with her, but that's been the last thing on my mind lately. While walking in the hallway he saw Hayden comes from the corner. Hayden went past Lennon without saying anything. Lennon said, "My heartless little brother." While Hayden stops he said, "Are you going to pretend like you didn't see me today as well?" Hayden turns his head and glares at Lennon, and said, "Don't speak to me if you're simply looking for a fight." Lennon walks to him, and said, "I'm just looking for a mere greeting. What are you so discontented with me about?" While Hayden looks furious he said, "Is it the extensively close relationship I have with your mother?" With an angry tone Hayden asked, "Shut up, Lennon Hills." Lennon asked, "Don't you know that it's your mother who agreed to put up with anything and everything when she entered House Hills?" While turning and going away Lennon said, "That also applies to you, so I suggest you be more careful next time, especially if you don't want to end up like your attendant." Lennon left. While still standing there Hayden thinks in his mind everything he says is right, but what I detest more than Lennon is myself for not being able to hate him despite hearing such words. It's dreadful, loving someone who hates me. I want to find solace in Ellie from these negative feelings. If only. While remembering Ellie in his mind, he thinks I knew where she was. He thinks if I'd known she would disappear this quickly, I would have persuaded her a little more gently. While sitting, he glances at the gun and thinks in his mind, no, even if I were to turn back time, would I have been able to provide her comfort when I've never done it before? He extends his hand to grab the gun and thinks I'm such a sorry excuse for a human. While holding the gun at his head, he thinks in his mind, as I thought, I'm better off dead. He shakes his head and tosses the gun away. He puts both of his hands on his face and takes a sigh. He mumbles and said, Ellie. He recalls his past memories and remembers a page. This was written on the page, mute Ellie, who will listen to everything you say. Full confidentiality is ensured, so feel free to tell her your deepest and darkest secrets. He asked, for what reason are you offering such an odd service? He talks in his mind. I thought both Ellie and her father were out of their minds. While sitting in front of Ellie's father, he talks in his mind, but I found myself signing the contract nevertheless. He thinks while signing the contract, I guess I'm also out of my mind. Though it's ridiculously expensive, it's not like I have anything to lose. He thinks it's money I won't use anyway if I were to kill myself. He thinks in his mind it felt incredibly foolish to tell someone I just met my secret, but... He said, Ellie, I believe I am attracted to men. While looking relaxed, he thinks in his mind it's relieving. Maybe if I keep meeting Ellie, I might finally be able to find some peace. He looks at Ellie and Lennon and thinks in his mind, and one fine day after I've met with Ellie a couple more times. He thinks in his mind, why are they together? Is Lennon one of Ellie's clients as well? To think someone as arrogant as him even has a secret. I must find out what it is. If I can take him down and become head of the household, maybe it'll make up for all my wretched feelings. While remembering Ellie trembling in fear, he tells in his mind, but my resolution was short-lived. He heard Ellie's father and other person talking. Is it possible to make one blind without any physical disfigurement? He thinks in his mind, I can't let Ellie be used by that worthless swine. Then he remembers saying this to Ellie. Allow me to help you escape from this place. He tells in his mind, by then, I was already willing to help Ellie even if she didn't tell me Lennon's secret. In his memories he recalls, however, the next day, he heard Ellie's father saying that ungrateful brat ran away. He tells in his mind Ellie had disappeared without a trace. He thinks in his mind, but why? I even offered to help her. Does this mean I won't ever see her again? He recalls putting a gun to his head and thinks in his mind, if I can't, then I. He recalls saying this to Ellie's father, do whatever you can to bring Ellie back. If you do, I'll give you however much of that money you love so much. He remembers while sitting in front of another girl and tells in his mind, I tried finding someone similar to Ellie, but no one could offer me salvation like she did. Until this day, I've been unable to find out about Ellie's whereabouts. He remembers going to Ellie's house. He went past the garden who is left undone. He opens the door and went inside. He looks at Ellie's father who is drunk sleeping on the table, and he thinks in his mind, just how much did he drink? It reeks of liquor. This said while looking at Ellie's father, are you awake? Ellie's father rises up from the table and takes a hiccup and said, who is it? Hayden said, Hayden Hills? Ellie's father asked, what brings you to this humble place at this hour, Lord Hayden? Hayden asked, have you found Ellie? He replied, don't you bring up that ungrateful child's name. I have no idea where she ran off with that wretch. He said, I even quit my job, thinking I could depend on her. Hayden takes a sigh and thinks in his mind, damn it. This house that reeks of liquor, this drunken scum, and the fact that I can't seem to find Ellie. Hayden grabs Ellie's father from neck while thinking, all infuriate me so much. With fear in his eyes, Ellie's father said, Lord Hayden. Hayden said with anger, don't you dare say my name with your dirty mouth. Hayden pulls a knife from his coat. He forcibly puts Ellie's father's hand on the table, while spilling the drink. He slices a finger. Ellie's father fell down and started shouting in pain. Hayden then said, "Shut your mouth. You won't die from having one finger sliced off," he said while leaving. "If you disappoint me again, I'll have your other 9 fingers then." Hayden left while Ellie's faith is shouting in pain. Hayden, with a serious look on his face, thinks, now who could be that wretch? Meanwhile, Hardwin, while exhausted, sits and said, "I'm exhausted. Let's take a break." Ellie said, "Did I disappoint you with my bad dancing?" She thinks in her mind, "I'm sorry, Hardwin. Having your hand on my waist was just too distracting." Hardwin takes a sigh and said, "Nobody's good at something on their first try. I used to be a bad dancer myself." Ellie said, "I see." Hardwin asked, "Are you just taking my word for it?" Ellie said, "Yes." Hardwin didn't speak. Ellie asked why. Hardwin, while putting a finger on his cheek, said, "No, it's just I thought that at least once you'd go." He imagines himself saying, "Really? But you're such a good dancer. I can't believe you were ever bad at dancing." He said, "Can't you get all surprised like this? I wasn't even that bad at dancing when I first started." Ellie thinks in her mind, it's a little late, but I guess I should repeat what he said. She said, Hardwin?" She thinks in her mind, what exactly did you say again? While Hardwin is looking, she said, "Could you repeat the example you just gave me?" Hardwin blushed and said, "You're making fun of me right now, aren't you?" Ellie, with a confused look, said, "Why would you think that?" Hardwin said, "Never mind. I guess I expected too much from you." Ellie gets shocked and shows a worried look. While Ellie is sniffling, Hardwin said, "I'm sorry. I was just joking." Hardwin said, "Were you distracted because of Lennon? Are you afraid you'll bump into him tomorrow?" Ellie nodded while looking away and said, "Yes." She thinks in her mind, he's wrong, but I don't think there's a need to correct him. Hardwin mumbles the only word he said, "You." Ellie, while confused, asked, "What was that? I couldn't quite hear you." Both of them looks at each other while the atmosphere is romantic. Hardwin said, "I said I'll protect you, Ellie. So don't worry too much." Hardwin turns his head the other side and Ellie said, "Thanks, Hardwin." While looking the other way, Hardwin blushed and said, "My knees ache. A storm must be coming." While looking at the sky from window, Ellie said, "You're right. The sky has gotten all gray." Ellie asked, "How come your knees ache already?" "You're only 17, Hardwin." Hardwin replied, "There's no rule that your knees can't ache at 17. Hardwin heard a loud rumble and flinches with fear in his eyes. While Hardwin puts both of his hands around his head, Ellie asked, "What's wrong, Hardwin? Are you all right?" While trembling, Hardwin replied, "I am fine." Ellie asked, "Are you scared of the thunder?" He replied, "Yes." While hugging Hardwin, Ellie said, "Don't worry. I'll be right next to you." While there is heavy rain outside, Ellie said, "You have nothing to be afraid of, Hardwin." Ellie said, "You're finally acting like a 17-year-old now. You're usually so mature that you don't seem your age." Hardwin said, "I bet you never thought I'd be afraid of thunder. Want to know a bigger secret? When the thunder gets really bad, I can't sleep alone." Ellie said, "Is that your way of telling me you want to sleep together?" Hardwin said, How can you say those things without hesitation?" Ellie asked, "Am I wrong then?" While hugging Ellie again, Hardwin said, "No, you're right. Stay with me, Ellie. I'm scared to be alone right now." Both of them sits on the side of the bed while not saying anything. Hardwin said, "This is a little embarrassing, but every time there was a storm, I'd sleep next to Hannah." Ellie said, "There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Besides, it's not like this will be our first time sharing a bed." Hardwin blushed and said, "You've changed, Ellie." While leaning on Ellie's shoulder, he sighed, "But it's nice to see you smiling more often now." He said, "When I was a child." While recalling his memories of a stormy night, he said, "There was a day when the storm was particularly thunderous." While running, he tells, "But that night," Hardwin shouted while opening the door, "Hannah." While Hannah is sleeping in bed, he tells Hannah wouldn't wake up. For a long time, she lay in bed, unable to move. It took a while before she finally woke up. That was the day my fear of thunder began. Since then, every time I heard the sound of thunder, I'd be reminded of that day's fear, horror, and sadness. I couldn't bear to be alone. So, I decided to come to terms with my weakness. I've always hoped I'd get better someday, but I can't seem to stop feeling the need to have someone I trust beside me during a storm. Meanwhile, the present. Ellie asked, "Do you trust me?" Hardwin replied, "I would have forced you out of here long ago if I didn't." Both of them heard thunder rumbling while they lean on each other. Hardwin hugs Ellie again. He said, "Even though I have nothing to fear anymore." While shaking, he said, "I don't know why I'm trembling so much." Ellie, with a worried look on his face, thinks in her mind, by that, does he mean? While remembering Hannah in her mind, Ellie thinks that since Hannah is dead, he has nothing to fear anymore? Ellie said, "Don't be afraid, Hardwin. I'll be right beside you. Why don't we get in bed? It's late now." Both of them gets in bed while the atmosphere is awkward. Hardwin said, "The sheets smell like you instead of Hannah now." Ellie asked, "Does that upset you?" He replied while looking at Ellie, "No, it just makes me think how much time has passed." While turning her head, Ellie said, "A year will pass by in a blink of an eye, won't it?" Hardwin said, "I'm only asking out of pure curiosity, but did you have any other clients other than Lennon and Labrado?" Ellie suddenly remembers in his mind. She said there was one more? While quickly turning his head towards Ellie, Hardwin shouted, "Really?" Ellie said, "Sorry. It completely slipped my mind to tell you." She recalls Hayden in her mind and said, "Do you know Hayden Hills from House Hills? Hayden used to be my client as well, and there's a chance we might see him at the banquet tomorrow." She said, "Though he probably won't act like he knows me even if he sees me." She looks at Hardwin's worried face and thinks in her mind, is Hardwin disappointed in me? While the thunder is rumbling, she thinks in her mind, why do I keep doing things that disappoint him? While looking at Ellie, Hardwin said, "I'm not disappointed, so you can stop making that ugly face now." Jaw trembling, Hardwin said, "If you're really sorry about what happened, why don't you lend a hand for me?" Hardwin said, "I'm glad you told me, even though it's something you could have kept from me forever." He said, "The most important things to me right now are safely becoming the Count and ensuring nothing happens to you." He asked, "Am I allowed to wish for your happiness? Do I have that right at least?" Ellie squeezes Hardwin's hand and said, "Of course. I wish you happiness as well, Hardwin." She said, "I'm going to make sure to keep my identity a secret from Hayden. I'm making progress and growing day by day." She said while looking with bright eyes, "So please believe in me. I promise to do my best." Hardwin takes a sigh and said, "Ellie, I've always believed in you." The next day, Ellie is standing in front of mirror while Madeline is standing beside her. Hardwin knocks on the door and comes in. He asked Ellie, "Have you finished getting ready?" "I'm." Hardwin stops in the middle of the sentence after looking Ellie and gasps. "While ready and looking beautiful," Ellie said. Hardwin. Madeline giggles and quickly started walking and said, "I shall take my leave now, my lady." Ellie said, "Thanks, Madeline." Ellie glances at Hardwin while her cheeks gets red. She said, "You're looking dashing today as well, Hardwin." Hardwin said while fixing his necktie, "Of course. We're attending an important event today, after all." While Hardwin's face gets red, Ellie said, "Let's hurry. We don't want to be late now." Ellie asked innocently, "What's wrong? Do your knees still ache?" While turning his eyes away from Ellie, Hardwin said, "And no, it's nothing." He started walking awkwardly and said, "Let's go, then." While confused, Ellie asked, "Why is he acting like that again?" Hardwin and Ellie travels in carriage. They reached at the banquet place. Hardwin holds her hand while Ellie gets down from the carriage. Hardwin said while grabbing her hand, "You look beautiful today." Ellie asked, "Will I be able to do this, Hardwin?" Hardwin held Ellie's hand and said, "Of course. I'll be by your side the whole time." He squeezes Ellie's hand and said, "Just act as you normally do. You'll be fine as long as you talk and smile only at me." Ellie said, "So, I should only look at you?" Hardwin turns his head the other side and said, "Yes, I suppose." While exhaling, Ellie thinks in her mind, Hardwin's right. I'll be fine as long as he's with me. While holding hands with Hardwin and walking, Ellie talks in her mind Hannah's smile, gestures, and walk. I'll try to recall and imitate them to the best of my abilities. Are you looking down at us right now, Hannah? While going to the banquet hall, she talks in her mind, if you are, please wish me all the best. While walking in the banquet hall, people are glancing and staring at both of them. Ellie thinks in her mind, everyone is looking at us just like back then. Hardwin asked Ellie, shall we dance once this song is over, Hannah? While giving Ellie a glass of drink, he said, let's have a drink for now. While grabbing the glass, Ellie said, okay. Ellie glances around and thinks in her mind, is Lennon here yet? While looking at other people, she thinks in her mind, he usually stands out in a crowd, but I don't see anybody like that. Since it's a banquet hosted at the palace, a night like Labrado probably won't. She saw Hayden besides other people, and Hayden also spots her. She looks towards Hardwin and puts the glass down and thinks in her mind, it's Hayden. Ellie looks at Hardwin and he nodded. Hayden comes towards them and said in a noble manner, it's an honor to meet you, my lady. I am Hayden Hills. While bowing in noble manner, Ellie said, the honor is mine. I'm Hannah Fever. Hardwin comes and stand besides Ellie, and he said, a pleasure to meet you, Lord Hayden. I am Hardwin Fever. While turning his head towards Ellie, Hayden said, yes, it's a pleasure to meet you as well, Lord Hardwin. I had looked forward to meeting the lady who turned down my brother's proposal. He said while looking at Ellie, you are absolutely lovely, my lady. Ellie said, thank you, my lord. Hayden stares at Ellie while she is confused there standing. She thinks in her mind, why is he staring at me like that? It's making me anxious. She said, well then, my brother and I shall. Someone interrupts Ellie and said, why, what a couple of familiar faces. All of them turns their heads towards the voice. It's Lennon Hills. Lennon said while tapping in his brother's shoulder, I'm especially delighted to see you here, Countess Fever. Lennon grins with a quiet mouth. Ellie said, as am I, Lord Lennon. She thinks in her mind, that's right. There's no reason you wouldn't be here. Lennon asked while standing besides Hayden, how is your health, my lady? Ellie replied, it remains poor, but not to the point where it should concern you, Lord Lennon. Lennon said, oh my, what a shame. Have you thought about the matter I talked to you about before? The woman I'm looking for has silver hair, and the witness told me he saw 2 women with silver hair getting on a carriage about a month ago. Are you curious as to what I found out? While remembering past events that happened with Lennon, Ellie thinks in her mind, is he talking about that? Ellie said while smiling, oh, my apologies. I've been so busy that it completely slipped my mind. Lennon comes close to Ellie and said, I see. It's one unfortunate incident after another. While feeling dizzy, Ellie thinks in her mind, I can't breathe. While turning to the opposite side, Ellie said, please excuse me for a moment. Lennon said, where or why? Hardwin interrupts Lennon and asked, where are you going? Ellie, while showing her hands, said, to wash my hands. Hardwin asked, do you want me to come with you? Ellie replied, no need. I'm not a child. All of them looked confused, surprised, and worried. After a few minutes, Ellie is walking in a hallway. She thinks in her mind while smiling, maybe it's because there's nobody around, but I can breathe so much more easily now. Ellie heard a walking sound coming towards her. She thinks in her mind, is someone there? While the sound is coming closer, she thinks, but I was certain there was no one around. She started running while holding her gown away from the sound that follows her. The person chasing her also starts walking fast. While running, she thinks in her mind, someone is chasing after me. Ellie stops running and turns her head back. It's Lennon who was chasing her. He also stops close to Ellie. Lennon. While confused and looking at Lennon, Ellie thinks in her mind, Lennon? Lennon reaches and grabs Ellie's hands by her wrist. He then slams Ellie against the wall and looks at her. With a scary look on his face, Lennon said, were you not curious as to what happened to the carriage? Ellie tries to release her hand and said, as I mentioned earlier, I was too busy to. Lennon said that carriage headed to Countess Fever's estate. Ellie thinks in her mind, there's no need to fret, Ellie. Even Lennon wouldn't know what happened in Countess Fever's estate. Ellie asked, "Are you hoping I'm the lady you're looking for, Lord Lennon?" Lennon replied, "Yes." While smiling, Ellie said, "How very unfortunate. I'm afraid I'm not her." Lennon said with a curious look, "Look here." He said with a worried face, "I don't see what the problem is here." Ellie said, "Lord." Lennon interrupts her and said, "Do you think I'm doing this just to hinder that child from being given the title of Count? I'm not interested in some child who cannot ascend because he's too young. If you want, I can even lend you my aid in helping him attain that title. If you really want to keep whatever happened to the real Hannah a secret, then fine. I won't pry." While turning her eyes away from Lennon, Ellie thinks in her mind, "But if you learn the truth." She imagines herself getting controlled by Lennon in her mind and thinks, "I know you'll try to control me with it." Lennon said, "All I want is to speak with you." Ellie clenches her hands and said, "This is extremely rude of you, my lord. Please step aside." Lennon said, "If you wish to keep up with this act, I don't mind playing along." Ellie said, "And if you wish that badly for me to take the place of that woman, then fine, I shall." Lennon said, "No, what I want isn't for someone to take her place. What I want is Ellie herself." Lennon moved his hand to Ellie. While Lennon is hesitating with his hand, Ellie thinks in her mind, "Does Lennon truly have feelings for me?" She talks in her mind, "But I'm simply a commoner born without an inkling of grace." While imagining her old self, she talks in her mind, "Lennon must have encountered countless elegant and beautiful noblewomen. So why is he unable to forget me?" She looks at Lennon's face and talks in her mind, "Is it because I'm different from those noblewomen? Or because I left before he could have me in the palm of his hand?" Ellie trembles while thinking. Lennon taps on Ellie's hand and said, "Your hand is trembling. If you truly don't wish to get caught by me." While Ellie is surprised and shocked, Lennon, and then make no mistakes. Lennon turns and started walking. Ellie while looking at Lennon from behind with a blank expression. She talks in her mind, "Go after him, Ellie." She started walking towards Lennon, going, and thinks in her mind, "Tell him everything that's on your mind." She grabs Lennon's hand and stops him. She thinks in her mind, "You no longer have to just stand by and listen." While holding Lennon's hand, Ellie said, "You're the one who shouldn't make any mistakes. You were lying when you said you had ambiguous feelings for the woman named Ellie. The truth is that you're in love with her." Lennon flinches and looks at Ellie, and said, "Ellie, I mean, Hannah." Ellie said, "If you want the woman you love to be happy, then you should respect her choices. So stop chasing after a woman who left you without being able to tell you why." She said while Lennon is looking furious, "Don't you think your actions are pathetic?" She leaves his hand and said, "Please refrain from behaving rudely toward me any longer. This is my final warning." Ellie gets back to the main hall while Hardwin is holding a glass of drink. Hardwin gets happy and said, "Hannah, you're back." He said, "What took you so long?" Ellie said, "I got a little lost." "Were you worried?" Hardwin said, "Yes, and if you know that, please don't do anything to make me worry. If you had come any later, I would have gone looking for you." He said while holding Ellie's shoulders with his hands, "Both the Hills brothers left a little while after you did, so I wondered if they had gone after you." Ellie smiles and thinks in her mind, "I should save what happened with Lennon for later." She said, "Don't worry. I came back in one piece, didn't I?" Hardwin, while in funny mood, said, "Oh, you think you're funny?" Ellie giggles and said, "I think I might have a natural talent for this." Hardwin laughs with his eyes closed and said, "I can't win with you, can I?" While Hardwin is laughing, Ellie's heart started racing, and other noblewomen also looks at Hardwin with awe. Ellie looks at other noblewomen staring at Hardwin and thinks in her mind, "Oh my. The other noblewomen are looking at Hardwin, too." She talks in her mind, "Come to think of it, being the brother of Hannah, who was the center of scandalous rumors, and given his disinterest in high society, Hardwin might have been subject to unsavory rumors, such as ones suggesting he was unattractive or disabled. However, Hardwin is so dashing." Hardwin asked Ellie, "Would you care for a dance, Hannah?" Ellie looks at Hardwin, who is sparkling with charisma. She thinks in her mind that he can effortlessly dispel any such rumors in one swoop. While giving her hand to Hardwin for dance, Ellie said, "Sure." She talks in her mind. Want to know something, Hardwin? Whenever I'm with you, I feel at ease. Maybe that's why I become so playful around you. Both of them walks to the center to dance while other people are looking at them. While the romantic music is playing in the background, they look at each other, and they started dancing. Ellie, while dancing, thinks in her mind, though I may have made numerous mistakes yesterday. She gulps and thinks, I'm going to try to forget about them. At least for today, I'm going to try my best. At the end of the dance, both of them bow to each other in a noble manner, while other people are clapping. Ellie whispered to Hardwin, we did it, Hardwin. Hardwin said, you were perfect, Ellie. I'm sure Hannah would be proud. After a while, both of them left the banquet hall and started walking. It's almost sunset. Ellie looks towards the sunset. They stopped to look at the sunset, and she said, what a beautiful sunset. While walking, Hardwin asked, how did you find the banquet? Was it not draining? Ellie replied, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. Hardwin asked, do you regret agreeing to help us out? While holding his arm, Ellie asked, is that what you think? Hardwin replied, no. She said, well, then you're right. Hardwin said, and you won't regret it in the future either. Ellie asked, how can you be so confident? He said, because I'll make sure of it. She asked, why are you so nice to me? Is it because you feel sorry for me? Or because I agreed to help you and Hannah? He said both, but I'm sure there are other reasons as well. While riding the carriage, Ellie said, I can't pinpoint just one. I'm just doing as my heart tells me to. Hardwin, wait, it's the same thing as me being unable to love anyone. In a flashback, Ellie and Lennon are dancing together. With a worried look on her face while dancing, she thinks in her mind, why am I dancing? She thinks while looking at Lennon, with Lennon, no less. And rather than dancing, this feels more like he's dragging me around. Lennon said, you said my feelings were a lie, didn't you? With a serious look on her face, Ellie thinks in her mind, but I don't want to run away from him. Even if I were to get swayed, I want to confront him. Lennon said to Ellie, if what I feel truly is love, what will you do then? Ellie said, I. Ellie heard a voice saying, Ellie. Ellie. She was sleeping while remembering. She opens her eyes. Hardwin said, we're home? While Hardwin squeezes Ellie's hand, she thinks in her mind, oh, it was just a dream. Hardwin asked, are you all right? You seem exhausted. She said, I'm fine. She thinks in her mind, if Lennon really likes me, do I have to return those feelings? Lennon is nice, at least to me, and he's never tried to harm me before, but that's no reason for me to accept his feelings. She said, Hardwin, to tell you the truth, Lennon confronted me at the banquet hall earlier. While Hardwin grew shocked after hearing Ellie told him, he said he found the carriage that Hannah and I were in. He told me it didn't matter to him if I were the fake Hannah and that all he wants is me, Ellie. He even said he was willing to help us. Ellie asked Hardwin, what do you think? Hardwin replied, my thoughts remain the same. I don't trust Lennon. Do you want to ask him for help, Ellie? Ellie said, I'm not sure. But what I do know is that I don't want to do anything you aren't up for. Hardwin smiles while looking at Ellie and thinks in her mind, I'm so proud of you, Ellie. After a while, both Hardwin and Ellie are sitting on a room on sofas. Someone knocks on the door. Madeline opens the door and comes in with a letter in her hand. She said, my lady, my lord, a letter has arrived. Madeline hands over the letter to Hardwin and he said, thanks, Madeline. While Hardwin is reading, Ellie asked, who is it from, Hardwin? Hardwin flinches and looks at Ellie and said, my uncle. Ellie, while remembering in her mind, thinks by uncle he means. She said, you mean the one who was after your title of count?